years, Canada has stepped up to fight alongside our allies to defend world peace and the international rules order that has kept us all safe. We recognize that our country is now, because of the changing climate, the changing technologies, and the activities of some of our potential adversaries, we are also now closer to the front line. Canada shares the largest maritime border with Russia of any country in the world. I recognize we have responsibilities to defend our country, our continent, and to be there strong for our allies. But I think if you're going to be strong around the world, you have to be strong at home.
Bill Blair, I thank you for joining me on Hard Talk. Thanks.
My pleasure, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here, our whole team at Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Really gray sky in Winnipeg out our studio window on Portage Ave this morning. We are expecting rain, about 5 millimeters and a high of 12 degrees. And we do once again have an air quality, special air quality statement issued for the Paw, Cormorant, Westray and Wanless, Flin Flon, Cranberry Portage and Grass River Provincial Park as people are still out of their homes due to the wildfire up at Cranberry Portage. So thanks for being with us. It's 3 minutes to 6. We'll check in with Heather in the news on that fire in a moment. First, let's say good morning. Good morning, Mr. Brad Lillies, behind the controls of YouTube. Good morning, Mr. Corey Funk. Corey directs the show and covers the commute. And hello, Abby Adiyemi. Abby is our technical producer on the program and will be covering the forecasts on air throughout the program. We are with you, as I mentioned, till 8:37. Traffic's moving fine. Nothing urgent to report. So let's go to Heather for our headlines.
Good morning. Well, officials with the Premier's office say Wapcanoe will head into the fire zone in northwest Manitoba today. That wildfire burning near Cranberry Portage continues to be about 31,600 hectares in size. It really hasn't changed. Air tankers from Manitoba and Saskatchewan are dousing those flames, and 5 additional crews from Ontario are expected this week. Power has been restored slowly to Baker's Narrows, but Cranberry Portage is still powerless, still in the dark. Manitoba Hydro asks people to be patient. Some infrastructure there was damaged because of the fire. And the city of Winnipeg wants to grant historic status to a very famous boot. The boy with the boot is a bronze statue at the entrance of the English Garden in Assiniboine Park. The city wants to add it to its list of historic resources. We'll hear more in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, in the first hour of the program, we're going to talk a little about work. Are you 20 years from retirement but feel like you just can't work another day? There's a name for that. It's called the Great Exhaustion. Remember the big quit? Now, apparently you didn't quit, but you're just really tired. We're going to hear all about it and why it's trending. In addition, later in the program, we'll talk to an activist about the newly launched Rainbow Week of Action. That's in the lead up to the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. And we will connect with Brittany Greenslade live later in the show as well for a report from the fire zone. Stay with us. Lots ahead.
With Tom Power. System of a Down lead singer Serge Tankian has a new memoir called Down with the System. Serge will tell you about the origins of his activism, how System of a Down got on the radio in the first place, and why it's kind of impossible to write and record new music with his band.
I feel blessed for it, but it doesn't mean that things should continue forever either.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Another wildfire in northern BC is forcing more people to leave their homes.
There are several fires kind of in the general vicinity. We're seeing a few fires in the Fort St. John zone.
That is Sharon Nickel with the BC Wildfire Service. She is talking about a fire near the Doig River First Nation, about a 40-kilometer drive from Fort St. John. Late yesterday, the entire community was put under evacuation order. Now about 100 people are heading to Fort St. John. They will be joining more than 4,000 evacuees from the Parker Lake fire. It is still threatening Fort Nelson to the north. John Roper is a Fort Nelson City Councillor.
It all happened very quickly, but I will say that we were prepared to leave just with the conditions and the predictions for the hot summer and the drought we're in. It wasn't a huge surprise, but it all happened very fast.
Officials say the weather is not helping efforts to bring the Parker Lake fire under control. Crews have not yet been able to determine if any homes have been destroyed. Michael Cohen is expected back in a New York court. He is testifying at Donald Trump's hush money trial. Trump's former lawyer and fixer is the key witness for the prosecution's case against the former U.S. president. Chris Reyes is following the case in New York. And Chris, Michael Cohen has been one of the most anticipated witnesses of this trial. What has he said so far?
Okay, so Michael Cohen didn't share anything on the stand that we haven't heard before. He's talked extensively about what he's done, but the prosecution is relying on Cohen to thread all of the separate pieces together that form the entire basis of their case. So the scheme to kill damaging stories about Trump, the hush money payment that facilitated that scheme, and allegedly falsifying business records to hide that payment, and then to do this while keeping it from voters ahead of the 2016 election. On the stand, Cohen talked about playing a part in all of that at the, quote, direction of and benefit of Mr. Trump. And what's really notable is Cohen explained that Trump's reaction to the Daniels story had nothing to do with his family finding out, but only worrying about his campaign, that Trump told him, this is a disaster, women are going to hate me. The prosecution wanted to go about this methodically to give a clear play-by-play of how these alleged crimes may have taken place.
When the prosecution finishes their questioning, Trump's attorneys will have their turn to question Cohen. What might we see there?
Well, by all accounts, Cohen was calm and measured on the stand yesterday, so it'll be interesting to see if the cross-examination will have a different effect. Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, has described Michael Cohen to this jury as someone with a track record of lying, someone who can't be trusted. The defense should be up to question him this afternoon.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes in New York. Hundreds of people are protesting outside Georgia's parliament in Tbilisi. Inside the legislature, lawmakers are about to give final approval to a controversial bill. It's the so-called foreign agent law. NGOs and media organizations will have to register with the government if more than 20% of their funding comes from foreign donors. People have been protesting for days. Critics say the government would use the information to suppress its opponents. Victims' advocates want Ontario Police Services to change the way they investigate intimate partner violence. If the alleged perpetrator is a police officer, they want the Special Investigations Unit to take over. A recent CBC investigation found more than a third of police officers suspended in Ontario over the past decade faced allegations of gender-based violence. Julie Ireton has been digging into the possible solutions.
I'm shaking. You can't talk about this.
This woman was a recent caller to CBC's Ontario Today. She says her husband, an Ontario police officer, was abusive. CBC isn't revealing her name for her own protection.
And when you do talk about it, people say, well, that's not possible. He's a police officer.
Several survivors and former cops tell CBC when an officer is accused of committing a crime, justice can be complicated, even risky. The executive director of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police says a chief can ask a neighboring police force to investigate, but that's not good enough for Leslie Bicos. She's a former constable. She now teaches sociology at King's University College in London, Ontario.
This idea of the police policing the police is hugely problematic.
Ontario's Special Investigations Unit is a civilian oversight agency. It looks into cases involving police where there's an injury, death, or alleged sexual assault, but not intimate partner violence. Kate Puttister says that's different from some other provinces. She's a professor at the University of Guelph.
The one in Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, and Saskatchewan also have explicit jurisdiction over intimate partner violence. Clearly, some other jurisdictions have made this determination. Intimate partner violence requires this independent investigation.
Ontario's SIU says it doesn't weigh in on policy matters. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Japan's Asahi Kasei Corporation is about to reveal it's building a lithium-ion battery separator plant in Port Colborne, Ontario. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Ontario Premier Doug Ford will be at the announcement later this morning. The CBC's Janice McGregor joins us from Ottawa with the details. And Janice, This is part of the rollout of Honda's $15 billion investment in Canada's electric vehicle supply chain. Walk us through this.
Marcia, when Honda made its big announcement, we were told that not only was it expanding its footprint in Alliston, Ontario, but the components for the Honda batteries were also going to be made in southwestern Ontario. Today, we can tell you that Port Colborne is one of the successful bidders as Asahi Kasei announces Canada's first lithium-ion separator plant. This technology is really important for the reliability and safety of electric vehicles, and this part of the process has never been made in Canada before. Honda is hoping to cut its battery manufacturing costs by 20% by setting up a very vertically integrated supply chain that's geographically concentrated in Ontario.
The federal and Ontario governments offered a lot of benefits to bring this plant to Ontario, but that is controversial.
That's right, $5 billion worth of controversial. One of the things we're listening for today is exactly what share this Port Colborne facility will get out of those government incentives, what promises have been made to this community in terms of job creation and local economic benefits in return. There have been skeptics about whether these big plays are worth it for taxpayers, including on the opposition bench. But yesterday, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland called on the Conservatives to pass the budget bills currently before the House to implement the investment tax credits.
It's not some abstract thing. Getting these credits passed into law is what we need to make investments like the Honda investment real.
Even as politicians are toasting this win for the Niagara region today, they also know that Winnipeg, for example, was in the running for this plant and missed out. There are sensitivities, particularly in Western Canada and Quebec, about how much focus Ontario's automotive sector is getting from the Trudeau government.
All right, thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. A young Calgarian is in a race against time for a life-saving kidney donation. The odds are against her. She needs a live donor who shares her rare blood type. It's more common among people of South Asian descent. Jennifer Lee has more.
Sana Ashuri visits Calgary's Foothills Hospital every few months to see her kidney specialist. A rare disease has left her with just 30% kidney function.
It doesn't have a cure with medication.
The 20-year-old also has an extremely rare blood type, and a kidney from someone with the same Bombay blood group reduces her risk of rejection.
What if I don't find a donor? Or what if I do find one and then it's not really a compatible match with my blood type? That whole process is very scary to think about.
The best matches are often coming from people that have also immigrated from similar parts of the world.
Dr. Dave Sidhu leads Southern Alberta's transplant program. He says about 1 in a million people of European descent have the Bombay blood type, compared to about 1 in 10,000 people from South Asian countries such as India.
The more diverse donors we can have in the donor pool, the better the chance, particularly for people coming from some of these small ethnic minorities, for finding a very suitable or better match.
No one in Ashuri's family, originally from Afghanistan, is a match. Her mom, Shaima Rahimi, says they're working to raise awareness about live kidney donation within South Asian communities as they scour the country for a donor who can help.
Come forward, it can change my daughter's life.
Jennifer Lee, CBC News, Calgary.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks so much for joining us here on Information Radio. Our whole team live in downtown Winnipeg at our CBC Manitoba studios. It's 9 degrees in the city this morning. And we are expecting rain, so we'll cover that in a moment. This hour on the program, of course, Heather Wells, the latest on the wildfire situation in northern Manitoba and where things are at as we start our day here. In addition, this hour on the show, we're going to talk to activist Chris Kennedy about the newly launched Rainbow Week of Action. It's in the lead up to International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. That's coming up later this week. So stay tuned for that conversation. And this half hour on the show, we have a work story. Are you still maybe 20 years from retirement, but you just feel you can't work another day, never mind another 20? Well, now there's a name for this. It's called the Great Exhaustion. So what's it about and why is it trending? I didn't promise we'd motivate you to get up for work. Might keep you in bed, that story. But we'll talk all about what it is this Tuesday morning, so stay tuned. Right now, let's go to Serious Matters here and find out the update on the fires, as I mentioned, and about other news. Heather Wells joined us from our news center. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, we're going to be hearing from more people who have been forced from their homes in Cranberry Portage because of that massive wildfire burning just 1.5 kilometers outside of town. The size of that fire still just under 32,000 hectares. Carolyn Gibbons and her husband have spent now a third night away from their home because of that wildfire. Some 600 people forced to flee. When Gibbons arrived with the convoy Saturday night, she says there were no hotel rooms in the PAW. We'll hear what they had to do. That's coming up. And it has been 4 days since people were forced out of their apartments at Birchwood Terrace on Portage Avenue. We're going to hear from some people who lived there who wonder why the owner of the building kept them in the dark about safety concerns. I'll hear more. I'll be back so you can hear more about all of those stories in our next news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the forecast now. Abby is here to talk about how great it is out there. Hi.
Yeah, good morning, Marcy. It's great out there. We have mostly cloudy conditions in the city at the moment. We are at 8 degrees. Expect this mostly cloudy conditions throughout the day with some showers starting this morning, sometime maybe around between 10 and 12. And we're anticipating around 5 millimeters of rainfall. The winds will be picking up, shifting east this afternoon, and we will be reaching that high of 12 degrees. Tonight, cloudy skies would stick with us, and then we'll have more showers in the evening, followed by overnight showers, and then we'll see the temperatures drop because of that to 9 degrees. And tomorrow, another wet day, but today we're looking at a high of 12.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk, the commute.
Yes, really, so far, at least here in Winnipeg, things seem to be running fairly smoothly. A reminder, though, of course, Highway 10, just south of Flin Flon from Baker's Narrows to the intersection with Highway 39 that runs, of course, through Cranberry Portage, is still closed due to the fire in the area. Other than that, though, things seem to be running fairly smoothly on the highways. But if you see something going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Can I ask you, Corey, I know that through the day, the fire situation yesterday, sure, we were staying on top of it in the morning, and then we sort of had official announcements at 2 o'clock. The province came out and spoke. But I know that on Radio Noon, really the first half of that program, which you worked on as well, was a lot of fire. And you had some great stories on there about how people are coming together. Late in the day, we started seeing people posting about sort of how evacuees are being sort of fed, really. And you had someone on talking about that.
Yeah, her name's Rebecca. She lives in the PAW. Shout out to her. She spent her Mother's Day when she heard that there was hundreds of people, coming into the PAW. She planned a barbecue on spec, like within a day's time, got the community together for, I think she said she fed almost 600 people in a day. And they had so much left over that they had a meal again yesterday night. And then actually so much that they actually plan to have another spaghetti meal today. So it's become kind of a thing in the community where she's just started feeding all the evacuees. It's really wonderful.
It's the other side of tragedy, right? When
every
we have
time.
Floods, fires. I agree with you every time. So wholeheartedly shout out to all those people that are also helping those families that are evacuated from their communities.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much communities step up for each other. There's always that good side. It's nice to see.
6:15 the time. Well, I had a really good friend one time say that actually Monday morning's not the hardest morning to get up. Tuesday is. Tired Tuesday, she used to call it. So this Tuesday morning, we have a story about something that's trending. Everyone has one of those weeks when work really just grinds you down. What you need is to unplug, but then unplugging gets harder than ever. So a tired week can turn into a tired month. And a month into who knows. Now, hopefully that doesn't sound familiar, but if it does, first up this morning, CBC producer Jennifer Keane says there's a name now for that feeling, the Great Exhaustion.
Sabrina Royal spent years working for one of Canada's big banks. She worked her way up from entry-level job to manager. And that's when her hours started getting out of hand.
When it was good, I was working 8 a.m. to about 6:30 p.m. When it was bad, there were times when I was signing off at midnight or later.
Lots of days she'd skip breaks, eat lunch at her desk. She felt anxious and tired.
I was having a very, very hard time falling asleep because I was only thinking about work. And eventually I started to recognize like this brain fog.
A classic case of burnout. The staffing agency Robert Half regularly surveys Canadian professionals. A year ago, about a third of the people they polled said they felt burned out. Now, it's more than 40%. And you know who's feeling it the most?
Millennials. These are people born sort of 1980, 1994. They were the ones coming back at over 50% saying that they felt burnt out.
Michael French works for Robert Half.
They're most likely to be the ones juggling a new family and maybe have a partner and taking on more debt and living together. So you can see why they have a lot of pressures on this cohort.
That includes the cost of living. For many, wages aren't keeping up with inflation. And that's leading to a growing sense of, what am I doing here?
In my vast experience, I have not seen it at this level in the past.
Janet Candido is an HR consultant who works with employers.
I'm personally dealing with clients where more and more and more employees are coming up and saying they are exhausted. They're burning out. They're mentally fatigued.
So what's going on? Well, Janet blames our 24/7 work culture.
We have instant messaging apps like Slack. People are phoning you, they want something right away. More the digital communication is taking over the workday. So I sometimes will spend my entire day answering emails that are coming in, which means I have to work in the evening to get the work done.
It can be even worse, she says, for people who work from home. When this happens, you better answer, or someone might think you're not on the job. And there's another thing. Right now, companies are struggling to find talent. They're taking longer to hire. That leaves people like Sabrina Royal picking up the slack.
There was no relief on deadlines. There was no, okay, we're just going to scrap this whole thing because we clearly don't have the capacity for it. It was just the work has to get done. So when I had no team, that was me. And if my team was feeling overwhelmed, then that was me.
But not anymore. Sabrina quit the bank and went to work at a board game cafe. And yeah, the money's not as good, but
it's a delight. My coworkers are fantastic. The regular customers are fantastic. They really, my heart grows 3 sizes every day.
For the cost of living, I'm Jennifer Keene.
Maybe that's resonating with you this Monday morning in Manitoba. 788-3205. You can always weigh in on anything you hear. But if you want to subscribe to the Cost of Living podcast, you can find it everywhere you get your podcasts.
Danse, Anine, Bonjour, and hello. It's me, your favorite cousin, Rosanna Deerchild. Guess what? Unreserved is turning 10. That's like 100 in Res Dog years. And to celebrate, we're inviting you to a live taping of Unreserved, May 22nd at the Park Theatre in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 territory. Sherry McKay, Doozy, and Unreserved's Auntie Circle will all be there. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community and click on the link to register.
So maybe you're going to that. That's coming up fast next week already. And I know that Rosanna's going to be up to speed on Thursday talking more about what they have planned for that very special live show. It is 6:21 a.m. right now on our live show. I'm Marcy Marcusa with Brad and Corey and Abby behind the glass. Heather Wells in our news center. 8 degrees in the city of Winnipeg, mostly cloudy. So a lot warmer than we were yesterday by about 5 degrees at this time. Brandon has already got the rain started. So light rain falling there at 6. Thompson is partly cloudy and 0. And in Winnipeg today, we're we're expecting about 5 millimeters of rain. Well, there's some important dates coming up here in Manitoba and in Winnipeg. The flag raising for Pride is coming up next Friday, May 24th. CBC, a proud sponsor of the Pride Winnipeg Festival, and that's coming up on June 1st. And then on Sunday, June 2nd, is there's Begonia is going to be hosting the main stage at the Forks to kick off Pride this year. So, of course, we have a walking float, and maybe you're part of those festivities as well. But that is coming up in the weeks ahead. Later this week, members of the LGBTQ plus community are going to mark another yearly anniversary. The International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia is coming up. So the first day of this place took place almost 20 years ago on May 17th, 2005. In the lead up to May 17th this year, later in the week, Chris Kennedy is with us. He's promoting a newly launched Week of Action, the Rainbow Week of Action. He's a director on the board at PFLAG Canada, and the organization offers support to families on the issues of gender identity and sexual identity. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So can you explain the premise of Rainbow Week of Action leading up to Friday?
Yeah, so amid rising anti-2S LGBTQIA plus hate and rhetoric, queer individuals, along with allies from various backgrounds, were speaking out through a national Rainbow Week of Action to advocate for a more inclusive Canada. This effort aims to combat hate, promote equality for everyone, to freely express themselves and feel safe in their communities. So as queer and trans people, allies, friends, and families, we're joining organizations across the country in speaking up and pushing back on this blatant hate against our families and community. This is really just our chance to turn the tide, reject that hate, and get back to what really matters, creating a Canada where everyone is free to be their authentic selves, safe in their communities, and treated with dignity.
Can you tell me more about what you're hearing from families about, you use the word hate quite a lot there, and we have examples in Manitoba where people would probably use the same word, but I'm wondering to you, what are you hearing from families that gives you the greatest concern?
Yeah, several developments support that hate across against the 2S LGBTQIA plus community is rising in Canada. Violence, harassment, and abuse are routine in the lived experiences of trans and gender diverse communities nationwide. Stats Canada continues to report an increase in reported hate crimes against the queer community. CSIS now is warning that the anti-queer movement in Canada poses a threat of extreme violence. Federal lawmakers themselves, they're drawing attention to the increase in hate and violence directed against the queer community, yet the federal government has failed to take any decisive action. We've all heard about the protests at drag brunches and drag story time events that have happened across Canada, for instance. Those resulted in disturbing clashes between participants and protesters. Some of those even required police intervention, while other events have had to be canceled or postponed due to security concerns sparked by violent threats made. You mentioned earlier, Winnipeg Pride is about to kick off. Pride festivals and parades scheduled to happen across the country starting in just a couple of weeks for many of them, are having to pivot to allow for increased security and safety measures. And many of those pride organizations, they don't have the deep pockets of funding to pay for it. Yet we want to keep our community, our friends, family, and allies safe. The government needs to do more. What's at stake here isn't just about 2S LGBTQIA plus people. It's about who we are as a country. Are we a country where we respect our neighbors and support minority rights? Or are we a country where we normalize discrimination and stigmatize difference?
So you've said repeatedly the government needs to do more. What more specifically? And you've nodded to security at events, but what more would you like to see?
So we've got a bunch of calls to action as part of our Rainbow Week of Action, like reducing wait lists for medical interventions like puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgeries. Overall, reducing wait lists for medical interventions has to be a priority because it directly contributes to the health, well-being, and equality of trans youth, allowing them to live fulfilling and authentic lives. Trans youth who are able to access medical interventions without significant delays can focus more fully on their educational and social development without the burden of waiting for essential treatments. I also just want to add that it's important to protect the integrity of our healthcare system here in Canada. A politician, for instance, shouldn't be meddling with our healthcare system while ignoring the expert advice of the Alberta Medical
So you're not
providers here across Canada.
So you're talking there about Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who would say that that they do not quote. This is from them, trans people. Rather, they say they're concerned about the well-being of young people. What is at the heart of the divide? And someone once said to me that we have to get everyone in a room and sort of just and get on the same page. But there isn't the same page in this. There's a deep divide there, and it's continuing to grow. And as you're saying, in some ways, it's showing up in hate. So where do you think we go from here to be the country that you're describing that upholds the rights of minorities with dignity and makes your community and others feel safe?
Yeah, Canada is such a beacon of human rights and acceptance around the world. And demonstrating queer acceptance is part of what makes Canada just so special. Ensuring equitable access to medical care for trans youth is a matter of human rights and social justice. And denying or delaying those interventions perpetuates systemic discrimination and inequality. Premier Smith has said that she hopes to depoliticize the issue and focus on children's well-being, yet these policies violate transgender people's constitutional rights and would lead to irreparable harm and suffering among transgender youth. Frankly, Premier Smith is playing politics with some of the most vulnerable members of our community, attacking them for cheap political points.
In what ways would you like people across the country to participate in the Rainbow Week of Action?
Yeah, so to participate in the National Rainbow Week of Action, people can attend one of 25 plus rallies or 30 or more letter writing events taking place across Canada between now and May 17th. We also encourage folks to contact their MP as well. Urge them to lift up their voices with us as we push for a more free and equal Canada. Folks can take action by sending your MP a letter. Head on over to rainbowequality.ca, and it only takes about 30 seconds. Or you can find a rally location in your community to attend in person. And there's a full event list on the same website as well, rainbowequality.ca.
All right, Chris, thank you very much for the conversation today.
Thanks so much, Marcy.
That's Chris Kennedy, Director on the board at PFLAG Canada. The organization offers support to families on issues of gender identity and sexual identity.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
So I mentioned getting into that interview about some of the key dates coming up here. So once again, the flag raising for Pride is coming up next Friday already, May 24th. And the big festival at the Forks is Saturday, June 1st. It runs from 12 to 4. And then Sunday, June 2nd, with the main stage headliner being Begonia on June 2nd. So I think that's going to be just a wonderful, wonderful day. And who doesn't want to see her sing live at the Forks, right? The Pride Rally is also, of course, earlier that day leading up to the show at the Forks. And CBC will be part of the parade. And everyone's going to be leaving here all dressed up in our shirts and bright colors and balloons at 11 o'clock. So I know last year's event was huge. I suspect it's going to be big and busy in the streets of Winnipeg this year again for Pride. It is 8 degrees in the city. It's mostly cloudy. And in traffic, just a quick reminder, of course, Highway 10 remains closed south of Flin Flon to 39 because of the fire up that way. And Heather will have the latest in a moment on what's going on there. In addition, coming up, we have business news as always. And Christelle Ramlakan's going to join us this morning with the opening day's markets and business stories, including what's going on with OpenAI. They're launching a new version of the artificial intelligence model that underpins its chatbot, ChatGPT. So we'll find out more about that right after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is cloudy and 8 degrees in downtown Winnipeg. Get set for some showers this morning, just about 5 millimeters expected, but it's the beginning of some damp weather. We'll see some rain continuing tomorrow and the next day. A high today of 12. Premier Wab Kinew is heading into the fire zone in northwest Manitoba today. A massive wildfire still threatens the community of Cranberry Portage. Officials at the Premier's office say Kinew plans to visit areas where many evacuees are staying. Now, Carolyn Gibbons and her husband spent a third night away from their home in Cranberry Portage. They're among some 600 forced to flee. Many are staying in the PAW. Gibbons has lived in Cranberry Portage for almost 50 years. And when they arrived by convoy Saturday night, there were no hotel rooms. She says they were taken in by strangers who made up a spare bedroom. Now they finally have a hotel room in the PAW.
We didn't have an option. Like, we've contacted our son in Brandon, and he said, well, come right here when all of this happened. Well, I have a medical appointment later on this week here in the PAW. I have been waiting already for 10 months for that medical appointment, and I don't want to give it up and start all over again.
Gibbons worries everything in her freezer back home will spoil. She says they had just stocked up on bait for the fishing season. Well, as of yesterday, the province's wildfire map says that fire is still about 31,600 hectares in size. Air tankers from Manitoba and Saskatchewan are working to douse the flames. 5 additional crews from Ontario are expected this week. Power knocked out by the wildfire is slowly being restored. Manitoba Hydro says power is back on at Baker's Narrows, but a helicopter patrol of Cranberry Portage found extensive damage to hydro infrastructure. The utility says its crews now know what they're up against and are working hard to get everyone back on. Still, there is no estimated time for that to happen. More people are out across Canada as a wildfire forced an evacuation order for the entire Doig First Nation in northeast BC. That First Nation has a population of about 335 people, with 85 listed as living on the reserve itself. Sharon Nickel is with the Prince George Fire Centre.
There's no immediate threat to structures in the area. The Doig River First Nation did implement their evacuation order. So we have air tankers that are continuing to action the fire, and we have 2 initial attack crews on site as well.
The town of Fort Nelson, BC, has also been evacuated, and people are also on alert in Alberta, where wildfires are burning. You can hear the latest on these fires, as well as more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. It's been 4 days since people were forced out of their apartments at Birchwood Terrace on Portage Avenue. Engineers uncovered corrosion on multiple columns in the underground parkade, prompting fears the building could collapse. Mela Carrier lived at Birchwood, and she says she noticed work being done on those steel pillars over the last 6 weeks. She's angry the owner, Latco, didn't warn them of the danger.
Emotionally, it's like I'm living a nightmare. It's surreal. I feel like this shouldn't be happening in today's society with our technology. They should have known way in advance, and they should have protected us as their residents.
Latco says it's working to bring the apartments back into use and will reach out to residents in the coming days. Carrier says she will not rent from that company again. She is now looking for an apartment to share with her daughter and their pets. The city of Winnipeg wants to grant historic status to a very famous boot. The boy with the boot is a bronze statue at the entrance to the English Garden in Assiniboine Park. The city wants to add it to its list of historic resources. The statue was commissioned by the city in 1897. It has since been moved several times. The statue's also been repeatedly vandalized and was even stolen in the 1990s. It was returned after a few months. Well, the Fort Garry Public Library has been coping with a leaky roof for the past 2 years. The leak in the children's section has damaged a long strip of the ceiling, which had to be removed. Plastic liners are used on shelves to keep the books dry. A second leak sprang up over the computer lab. Longtime library patron Allison Mercer is upset the city hasn't fixed the damage.
The city doesn't prioritize libraries in the way that they should.
A 2023 report from the city compared Edmonton, Calgary, and Regina's libraries to Winnipeg's. It found Winnipeg spends the least amount of money on libraries per capita. City officials say they have to prioritize needs based on budget. They say they are currently investigating the damage at the Fort Garry Library. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, Heather Wells, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, it is warmer today than it was yesterday morning, but that means it's going to rain, and it is. Abby?
Definitely. When it's warm the day before, it's going to rain the day after. Currently, Winnipeg, we are at 8 degrees. We see cloudy skies. We're expecting showers throughout the day, and we should be expecting about 5 millimeters of rainfall. Now, about the winds, it's going to be picking up, shifting to the east around the afternoon period, and we will be reaching a high of 12 degrees. Now, for tonight, we should expect more showers, and then the temperatures will dip down to 9 degrees. Heading west to Brandon now, where it's 6 degrees, already seeing some light rain. The showers are in the forecast, and for folks in that part of the province, you should be seeing about 10 to 15 millimeters expected, and you will be reaching a high of 11. Now we move north to Thompson, where it's currently 0 and partly cloudy. Now today's forecast actually calls for mainly sunny skies and a high of 15. And if we go further north to Churchill, it's chilly at -6, also mainly clear at the moment. Churchill is expecting mainly sunny conditions and will be reaching a high of 4 degrees. So the north will be seeing more of like a sunny conditions today. Dublin is at 6 degrees with cloudy skies. Showers expected starting this morning. Around 5 millimeters of rainfall you should be seeing, and you'd get to a high of 9 degrees. And Gimli, where it's 7 degrees and cloudy, the Interlake region can expect cloudy conditions with showers starting this morning also and heading to a high of 11. Steinbach is at 8 degrees at the moment and already seeing some sunny breaks at that part of the province. Today calls for mainly sunny skies, becoming a mix of sun and clouds later, and we'll be seeing a high of 16. And finally, Morris is at 8 degrees and it will be cloudy. The Pembina Valley region can expect cloudy conditions with showers beginning this morning, totaling 5 to 10 millimeters, and would get to a high of 13. In summary, Winnipeg will see cloudy conditions with some showers today.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
And let's get to the morning commute at 6:37. Corey Funk?
Yes, it's really just one issue, and it's in the highway just south of Flin Flon. Highway 10 from Baker's Narrows to Highway 39, the intersection with Highway 39 is closed because of that wildfire in the area. That's really the only highway closure out there right now you need to know about. In the city, things are running fairly smooth. I haven't heard any issues there. If you're walking, bike, and driving, though, you see something, give me a call on that CBC commuter line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing. That number, 204-788-3093.
What I really like is earlier this hour where you're talking about how communities are coming together to help evacuees and the paw and the dinners and such. And now when you look at the Facebook pages of the RM of Kelsey and Cranberry Portage, there's thank yous being posted.
Yeah.
For after every event, they're like thanking volunteers by name and thanking all the local businesses for, helping to feed people and come together and make people as comfortable as they can be. So it's really nice.
People have stepped up.
And apparently they're having spaghetti today.
Oh, amazing.
From 3:30 to 7, but don't go if you're not an evacuee.
Yes.
This is all going on in the paw. It is 22 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Well, next on CBC, it's time for business news. And Christy Ramlakan joins us via Zoom with that. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So OpenAI is launching now a new version of the artificial intelligence model that underpins its chatbot ChatGPT. So what do we understand about all of this?
Well, it's supposed to be faster and cheaper, and this startup is really trying to hold on to its lead in a market that's getting very crowded. So the company debuted GPT-4o during a live stream event yesterday, and it's an updated version of its GPT-4 model, which is now more than a year old. The company says the new large language model trained on vast amounts of data from the internet will be better at handling text, audio, and images in real time. So the updates are supposed to be available in the coming weeks. And the company says when asked a question verbally, the system can reply with an audio response in milliseconds. So have a listen to some of the presentation.
So my friend Barrett here, he's been having trouble sleeping lately. And I want you to tell him a bedtime story about robots and love.
Oh, Oh, a bedtime story about robots and love? I got you covered. Gather round, Barrett. Once upon a time, in a world not too different from ours, there was a robot named Bite. Bite was a curious robot, always exploring.
Started this story, but I want a little bit more emotion in your voice, a little bit more drama.
Got it. Let's add some drama. Once upon a time, in a world not too different from ours.
So yeah, if that's the way that it can really work in real life, it's kind of surprising. I feel like I am seeing, years in the future happen right now.
Yeah.
So the release is also poised to shake up the rapidly evolving AI landscape. And that's because, a growing number of startups and big tech companies have recently pushed out their own AI models that they say match or even surpass GPT-4.
Every time you do a story like this, Crystalia, I want to rent all the movies from the past and see, how much they match up to where we're at right now.
I know.
Let's go to labor news. There's a first for Canada.
Yes, that's right. So a Quebec-based union says its application represent around 200 Amazon workers has been certified by the province's labor tribunal. So like you were just saying, it's the first time in Canada that employees have unionized at an Amazon warehouse. So workers in Laval will hold their first General Assembly to adopt a constitution and bylaws and elect representatives in the coming days. And it's going to launch a consultation to prepare a list of contract demands. Now, the union president says over the past few months, Amazon has pulled out all the stops to block the unionization campaign, flooding the workplace with scaremongering messages. However, a spokesperson from Amazon says the company is challenging the labor board's decision on Friday to certify the union, and the company takes issue with the card check certification. So that's where a union application can be certified without a vote if a majority of workers at the workplace sign a union card. Now, not all provinces have card check certification, but Quebec and British Columbia are among those that do. For more on this, here's Sean O'Brady, who is an assistant professor of human resources and management at the DeGroote School of Business at McMaster University.
One, it shows that it can be unionized. You can accomplish unionizing in Amazon, which inspires other people, other workers and other Amazons who are upset with the working conditions of Amazon. And as we know, it's very demanding. They monitor the work very closely. There's a high pace of work, various forms of insecurity in the workplace. And so, it wouldn't be surprising to see that some workers will look at this and will become union activists trying to unionize.
In April, Unifor filed applications to represent workers at 2 Amazon warehouses in BC. However, it withdrew its applications and accused the e-commerce giant of providing a suspiciously high employee count. And at the time, the company said it's confident it provided accurate and complete information. But Unifor has promised to redouble its efforts to unionize those 2 fulfillment centers.
And finally, before we look at markets, there's some clothing stores in Canada, including some of the chains that we have here in the city that are starting liquidation sales.
Yes, that's right. So Ted Baker, Brooks Brothers, and Lucky Brand have started clearance sales. The company that owns them began insolvency hearings late last month. There are 25 stores under these 3 banners across the country, and they're owned by New York-based Authentic Brands Group, or ABG. So all sales are final now, and the company said online shopping is no longer available for the time being. And late last month, the owners of Ted Baker's Canadian operations filed for creditor protection in a bid to help the retailer get enough breathing room to decide whether to liquidate and wind down the business or pursue other alternatives. Lawyers for the ownership group say the clothing brand is facing significant challenges and have been unsuccessful in reducing costs, improving sales, and reaching positive cash flow here in Canada. So it's not clear how many stores will close, but some could still be withdrawn from liquidation if a third-party transaction happens for some or all of the assets by May 17th. Now, one retail expert CBC spoke to says a company like ABG, which owns dozens of brands, including Sports Illustrated, Quicksilver, and Eddie Bauer, sees brands like low-hanging fruit. She says they're buying them because they can get them for cheap, but not necessarily because they're using them to make profit. They're taking the customer data instead, and that data is worth so much more sometimes than the actual product they're selling.
Interesting. What's going on in the markets?
So stocks are flat in Europe as global investors await the latest U.S. inflation reports. Germany is down, the UK is up, France is down. In Asia, markets are mixed as stocks on Wall Street tumbled overnight. Japan is up, Shanghai and Hong Kong are both down. Oil is up 16 cents to 79.28 U.S. per barrel. Gold is up $7.58 to $2,343.91 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar is down 0.02 of a cent to 73.15 cents U.S.
All right, Crystal, talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
With Business News on CBC, that's Crystal Round-Lecan. 6:45 a.m. is the time right now, Tuesday morning. How you doing, everyone? We're kind of in that window where life gets really, really busy, and there's like 6 weeks left of school. And we had that really warm day Saturday, but this week then again is just a little chillier. Of course, it's rainy, so it's really cloudy. It's already raining in Brandon. It's going to rain here, about 5 millimeters in Winnipeg, and right now 8 degrees. We're heading for a high of just 12 in the city today. If you want to reach us in traffic, 788-3093. Well, let's return to our top story in Manitoba. The town of Cranberry Portage is still effectively empty this morning, still without power. As you may have heard on the news, Baker's Narrow, power has been restored there, and they're still working on it elsewhere. Not much change in where the size of this fire around Cranberry Portage outside Flin Flon. About 32,000 hectares continue to be what they're grappling with up north. So hundreds of residents really were just grabbing what they could and making their way to the paw. And as you heard on the news, scrambling to find places to stay throughout the weekend and in the early part of this week yesterday. CBC reporter Brittany Greenslade was there. She's in the paw. She spoke to 2 evacuees yesterday, Larry Smirch and Debbie Asham. And Debbie started by telling her how she's feeling about all this.
Very panicky and stuff, and just worried and about your house and your belongings and stuff. So the people. So yeah.
What were you able to take with you? How much stuff?
About 3 pairs of clothes. I ended up taking. I didn't even have a hairbrush. I left. I didn't have soap that I wanted. Nothing. I didn't bring my shampoo, so we had to actually get a bunch of that.
What were you able to take with you? How much stuff?
About 3 pairs of clothes. I ended up taking. I didn't even have a hairbrush. I left. I didn't have soap that I wanted. Nothing. I didn't bring my shampoo, so we had to actually get a bunch of that stuff too.
What is it like seeing that fire coming so close to your community?
It's terrifying. You know, we always know Cranberry's been a fire trap, but when we kind of expected something to happen because of the winter and how little snow we had, but it was, it was too fast.
Larry, take me through what it was like when you first saw that fire coming so close.
Well, I could see the black clouds and that, from early morning and that, and the way the wind direction was blowing. So I was I've got a camper and that, so I was loading my camper pretty well all morning and putting stuff away from there. But I still forgot my suitcase with my clothes, forgot my shaving kit and that. But I have like musical instruments and stuff that isn't insured and that, so I put all that into the camper there. So, but there was still the last hour. Then my son Ryan, he came and gave me a hand to hook up the camper and load a few more things and some of his instruments and that, and put it in the camper, and then I drove out to Viking Lodge there and had a look there, and you could see the red above the clouds there and that, and it was scary. We've had to do it once before. I think in 2010 it was there where we had to pull out. And for me, it was more the thing about smoke and that. Like I couldn't stand the smoke with my lungs and that. So I figured it was. That time we went down to Wanless and that and stayed there for 3 or 4 days. But I had everything all packed in boats, campers, trailers, and everything, and dogs. And we spent a few days, 4 days down there and that. And but Cranberry weathered that one as well, eh? And so I'm hoping. I've got my pontoon boat, my fishing boat, my quad, my snowmobile, all left behind there in that area, and a lot of things that we've collected over the years. My wife passed away about 1.5 years ago. So when I started talking about collectibles, then I just thought about her. But anyway, I'm parked at the agricultural grounds there with my camper and that. And I think I've only used it once before, so I figured out how to get the propane going, and we plug into electrical, and I didn't have a hose in the camper to connect up to the water and that, so there was a lot of things that I forgot. So maybe next time I'll be better prepared.
Cranberry Portage Evacuee's Larry Smirch there and Debbie Asham in conversation with CBC's Brittany Greenslade yesterday in the Paw. Brittany is still there this morning. She's actually going to connect up live with us at 7 o'clock and we'll find out more about the current situation and people's moods today, as not much has changed overnight. Size of the fire the same, still no power in Cranberry Portage. As I mentioned, power though restored to Baker's Narrows. We do have on Facebook, this is what the community has asked, that you go to the Arm of Kelsey page. If you're looking for any information, that's the best place. There's also Cranberry Portage page, but there's a lot of people there that are coming together to try to help evacuees in the Paw. And there's a posting this morning that says, are you a community member looking to donate, but you don't know who to ask? And there's a list there. So they're trying to get together a dinner and they're looking for very specific donations. So the best thing to do is to check out the RM of Kelsey page if you're looking for more information on evacuees, or if you're someone that wants to donate to help people out. It is 9 minutes to 7 o'clock now on 89.3. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and up next on the show, let's turn our attention to federal politics. The way that federal political parties choose their candidates has been something that's been under scrutiny lately, both at the Foreign Interference Inquiry, but also through complaints from potential candidates about unfair practices. The races to represent the parties start long before the election and often take place off the radar of most of us and most Canadians. To talk about the process and the criticisms, Ryan Tumulty is here. He's a parliamentary reporter with the National Post, and we talk to him most Tuesday mornings. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we are hearing different criticisms, as I alluded to, from the nomination process or then how parties choose candidates. Let's start with this interim report, though, about foreign interference and what it says now.
Yeah, I mean, it says that these nomination contests are sort of particularly vulnerable to foreign interference, basically because they're on a smaller scale. They're not overseen by Elections Canada or any kind of other agency. So it's not that difficult for a foreign power who wants to influence which candidate gets picked to, show up with some people and sign up for some memberships and cast some votes. That is sort of the allegation that swirled around Toronto MP Han Dong. He was a Liberal. He won the Liberal nomination there in Don Valley North. He sits as an independent now since some of these concerns have arose last year. But basically, the report says that there was some intelligence, not sustained, but some intelligence that suggested that the Chinese consulate had been involved in recruiting people and busing them to his nomination contest to vote for him. And certainly, that is something that is within the rules of the Liberal Party. You don't have to be a Canadian citizen to vote in these nomination contests.
Now, another candidate who was hoping to be the candidate for the Conservative Party from the Toronto area once again is also not happy with the process that she entered into. So what are her issues and allegations?
Yeah, so her name's Sabrina Mado. I should note, for the record here, that she was a National Post columnist before jumping into politics. But she basically says that, someone had access to the party's email list in that area, and they were sending out emails to, Conservative members in the area with allegations against her and sort of smearing her. They said that's not a list that just anybody should have had access to. She encouraged the party to put a stop to this, and it didn't seem to happen. She said also when she was out signing up new members, her rival campaign seemed to have access to those members' emails and contact information right away, and that was a concern for her. That shouldn't have happened either. So she said she tried to get the party to address these concerns, but they didn't move quick enough for her, and she decided to drop out of the race.
How is the process for nominating candidates determined?
Yeah, so it's entirely at the control of parties. They make their own decisions about how their nomination processes are run. And it usually gives a lot of latitude to the leader. So leaders usually have to sign off on nominations. They can disqualify candidates, and parties get to decide sort of who can run and even, who can vote in these races. So certainly it's really not it's not the same as the open democratic process we see in elections more broadly.
We've had some of these conversations here, especially after this is a provincial issue, but after the provincial leadership race where Heather Stephenson won, that party is going through a whole review of their rules and processes. But where do changes or concerns with the processes get addressed? Is it within party at the federal level as well?
Yeah, absolutely. If someone has a concern about how a nomination contest was run, their really only outlet is to take that issue up with the party and see if changes can be made there. There have been cases like this, issues that have been taken to court over the years, but, courts generally come back with the conclusion that political parties are private organizations and they're allowed to run their nomination contests as they see appropriate.
What changes then are being talked about maybe more broadly to address, any of the concerns around how candidates are chosen that you've raised?
Yeah, well, I would say there's the big option, the big nuclear option almost, which is to get Elections Canada involved, have them oversee these races. I think there's some legitimate concerns about that from parties. And certainly, party leaders right now get the ability to disqualify or sign off on candidates. And I think they want to hold on to that. They don't want to be forced to carry someone on their party banner. I think inside parties, there is now some conversation going, especially after some of these foreign interference allegations, because, it's what happened or may have happened, I should say, with the Liberal race there could happen to any race, really. There are, other parties' races and rules would probably allow for much of the same thing. So in the Liberal Party, for example, like you said, you don't have to be a citizen to vote, and you can vote as young as 14 in a nomination contest. So I think there may be some push to alter that, to look at a different way of doing that. But, ultimately, all of these things will be for parties to decide.
Ryan, thank you very much for this.
No problem. Take care.
Ryan Tumulty is a parliamentary reporter with the National Post. It is 3 minutes to 7 o'clock, and let's stay with the news here. Heather Wells is in with our local headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Premier Rob Canoe is heading into the fire zone in northwest Manitoba today. A massive wildfire still threatens the community of Cranberry Portage this morning. Officials at the Premier's office say Canoe plans to visit areas where evacuees are staying. We're going to hear from some evacuees coming up in our next news. As well, the city of Winnipeg wants to grant historic status to something you have likely seen. It's a statue that graces the entrance to the English Gardens at Assiniboine Park. The boy with the boot. We'll hear all about it in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather. It is right now, as I mentioned, just ahead of 7 a.m., and it is 8 degrees in the city, mostly cloudy. We're expecting rain, about 5 millimeters to start at some point later this morning, but the skies are getting pretty dark out there. Brandon is raining already, light rain and 6 degrees. In Winnipeg, as I mentioned, 5 millimeters expected and a high of 12 degrees. Traffic fine, 788-3093 if not, and Highway 10 south of Flin Flon to 39 remains closed because of the fire. Coming up in the next hour of the show, we are going to talk more about what is going on overall with the dry soil conditions across the country and how that's going to impact the firefight in northern Manitoba, and also what kind of season we're looking for ahead. So stay tuned for that discussion. Also in the next hour of the program, you might have seen this. A local photographer has landed his sunflower fields picture on the latest Canada Stamp project. It is the Fields of Altona. You've probably seen them as you've been driving up the highway. So we're going to talk to him more about his latest stamp because he's been the artist behind previous stamps as well. And right after 7 o'clock in World Report, as the trial for serial killer Jeremy Skibicki continues, we will hear more about how the case is impacting specifically the Indigenous community and families of other missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So stay tuned for that. We'll hear how people are finding emotional support. Right now, it is time for World Report.
On the Current. try oysters with kiwi? That is just one of the flavor combinations suggested by artificial intelligence that restaurants are trying out to see if humans actually find them tasty. AI and food coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. In northern BC, dry and windy weather is fueling the fire near Fort Nelson. The province's wildfire service says the flames close to the community could become more aggressive, and crews have a new fire to fight. This one is burning near Fort St. John. That city is already hosting more than 4,000 evacuees. Tanya Fletcher has more.
The entire Doig River First Nation was put under evacuation order late Monday as a nearby fire spread through trees and foliage. Later in the evening, the district expanded that order to include properties north of the reserve as well. In total, more than 100 residents. This latest front not far from Fort St. John. Sharon Nickel is with the BC Wildfire Service.
There are, several fires kind of in the general vicinity. We're seeing a few fires in the Fort St. John zone.
Yet Fort St. John is already the evacuation epicenter for thousands of other people. Nearly 4,500 made the 4-hour drive from the north, where the Parker Lake wildfire is burning dangerously close to Fort Nelson. They were ordered to leave on Friday. Now, even emergency officials have moved their operations center as the flames arrive on the doorstep of the community. John Roper is a Fort Nelson city councillor who's now sheltering in Grande Prairie, Alberta.
It all happened very quickly, but I will say that we were prepared to leave just with the conditions and the predictions for the hot summer and the drought we're in. It wasn't a huge surprise, but it all happened very fast.
Firefighters are still actively engaged in fighting back the flames and still haven't been able to assess whether any homes or buildings have been lost. Officials are expected to provide an update on the fires later today. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
In Alberta, fire officials say the wildfire near Fort McMurray has not grown in size. It is holding at 6,500 hectares, but officials still consider it out of control. Crews are hopeful some forecasted rain will help. But the fire in Grande Prairie County has a worse outlook. Winds and tinder-dry conditions there are causing it to spread. It is estimated to be over 1,300 hectares. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Kyiv to show support for Ukraine. But billions in military aid from the U.S. is what Ukrainian troops really care about. Those weapons are starting to arrive at a time Russia is opening up a new front in the northeast. Julia Chapman reports.
Welcome to Ukraine. How are you? Nice to see you.
Rolling into Kyiv on a dawn train, Antony Blinken brought a message of support. The U.S. Secretary of State told President Volodymyr Zelensky that aid is arriving and more is on its way.
And that's going to make a real difference against the ongoing Russian aggression on the battlefield.
It's been 3 weeks since the U.S. Congress approved tens of billions of dollars in military aid for Ukraine. For Ukrainian troops, it's not a moment too soon. Many of them are being redeployed to the northeastern Kharkiv region, where Russia has begun a fresh offensive. It claims to have taken control of 9 villages and parts of the town of Vovchansk. Some officials in Ukraine have blamed delays to military aid for the new incursion. But former NATO commander General Sir Richard Shirreff says it will only allow the country to hold ground rather than retake it.
This strategy, such as it is, of giving Ukraine only enough to defend itself, is not going to achieve success for Ukraine.
Thank you so much for this package. Thanks to Congress. Thanks, President Biden.
President Zelensky says the aid deliveries are crucial to the war effort, but he emphasized that air defenses are still undersupplied, making a plea for reinforcements in the second largest city, Kharkiv. As Russians cross the border into the Kharkiv region, the city is increasingly vulnerable. Julia Chapman for CBC News, London.
Human Rights Watch says Israeli forces have carried out at least 8 strikes on aid workers in Gaza since October. The new report looks at specific cases where aid organizations provided their coordinates to Israeli authorities. Human Rights Watch says the IDF launched strikes with no warning to the groups. One of those incidents was the series of drone strikes that hit a convoy of World Central Kitchen vehicles. Jose Andres is the charity founder. He told The Guardian he believes his team was deliberately targeted.
Systematically, car by car, they were targeting us in a conflicting zone, in an area controlled by IDF, them knowing that was our teams moving on that route.
The IDF says that incident was a mistake. Human Rights Watch says Israel has not responded to requests for more specific information about the 8 attacks documented in its report. In India, at least 14 people have been killed by a falling billboard. 75 others are injured. Crews use heavy equipment to remove debris. Dozens of people could be trapped underneath. The accident happened in Mumbai during a thunderstorm. High winds caused the billboard to sway before crashing down. It landed on a cluster of houses and a gas station. Officials say the sign measured 70 meters by 50 meters. That is bigger than an Olympic-sized swimming pool. For many Canadians, the process of getting a new passport is still causing frustration. On the phone and in person, people are waiting hours. These are not new complaints about Passport Canada, and people are asking why the federal government still has not fixed the problem. The CBC's JP Tasker reports.
All of our agents are currently busy. Please stay on the line.
It's a dreaded message nobody wants to hear.
There are currently 302 calls ahead of you.
Hours-long wait times are the norm at Passport Canada. The federal government promised to fix post-COVID chaos at the agency, but it never delivered on a promised online passport application to help alleviate the backlog.
I was angry and I was frustrated, and my daughter, she was near tears.
Travelers say the wait times to get through on the phone are agonizing.
Who's got that kind of time? 500 calls?
Debbie Braun from High River, Alberta had a problem with her passport application. It took 5 calls and more than 12 hours on hold to finally resolve it.
I followed the rules. I did what I was supposed to do, and then I got to go through the nightmare, and you get upset,
The in-person wait times are not much better. Data reviewed by CBC News shows it can take more than 3 hours to get to the front of the line at passport offices in Canada's big cities.
I think 3 hours wait is excessive by any standard.
Andrew Griffith is a former senior public servant.
And it's the kind of thing that I think really undermines the faith of people in the government institutions.
The minister responsible for fixing the passport program wasn't available for an interview. Officials say a high volume of applications is causing delays. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
Michael Cohen is expected back for more testimony at Donald Trump's hush money trial in New York. Cohen took questions from the prosecution yesterday. He said Trump promised to reimburse the money he fronted for the hush money payments. Cohen also said Trump was constantly updated about efforts to bury stories that could be harmful to his presidential campaign. Trump denies doing anything wrong. Today, his attorneys are expected to cross-examine Cohen. In just over 3 weeks, Canadians will be marking a major milestone, the 80th anniversary of D-Day, but they will be doing it with very few veterans still alive from that time. Ashley Burke has the story.
Retired Private John Priest lays a candle on the gravestone of the former commander of Canada's Army during the Second World War.
This is too much. It takes me back to the old days.
A final tribute from a 97-year-old former soldier. That poignant moment during a candlelight procession at the National Military Cemetery. It's one of a series of upcoming events to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day, a pivotal battle for Western allies that saw Canadian, British, and U.S. troops among the countries that invaded German-held France.
Without D-Day, you wouldn't have beaten the evil of the world. And that was Hitler and his Nazis.
Vice Chief of Defense Staff Lieutenant General Frances Allen says she'll be attending tributes like this leading up to the anniversary next month.
What motivated people to give up everything for their country, for their families, really is something that makes you reflect.
About 80 cadets, military members, and ambassadors gave a standing ovation to Priest. He wasn't in Normandy on D-Day, but is among the last of the Second World War veterans.
I feel very humble being here because I seem to represent most of the old soldiers now.
Canada's national ceremony will be held at Juno Beach in France on June 6th. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. If you are looking for tools to talk about the day's big stories with the little people in your life, check out cbckidsnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. Well, it's raining in Brandon. It is coming here to Winnipeg. A really gray sky out there. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team at Information Radio. You're on CBC. This is 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. 9 degrees in the city right now. Your full forecast in a moment. Well, there will be some rain coming to northern Manitoba, but of course the wildfires continue to be the top story today. Heather with an update in a moment. This hour on the show, we're going to be talking more about what is going on in the bigger picture. So at 10 to 8 this morning, an expert about the dry soil conditions and how that's impacting the firefight in our province. So stay tuned for that. Also this hour on the program at 7:40, a familiar Altona scene has landed on the latest Canada Post stamp series. We're going to talk with the photographer behind the sunflower field and the blue sky image and how it made its way to the stamps. Stay tuned. Right now to Heather Wells for the latest on the fires and other stories. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's premier is expected to head north to the fire zone this morning to get a chance to meet with fire evacuees. There are about 550 people forced out of their homes from Cranberry Portage. One of them, Carolyn Gibbons, spent a third night in the Paw. When they first got there were no hotel rooms. They finally got one. We'll tell you, though, how they managed the first few hours in the Paw after being forced out of their home because of that big wildfire. And people forced from their apartments in St. James last week wonder why they were kept in the dark for weeks before that sudden evacuation. Engineers uncovered corrosion on multiple columns in the underground parkade at Birchwood Terrace, prompting fears that building might collapse. We're going to hear from one person who used to live there coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby, those are rain clouds.
Yeah, rain clouds rolling in on us, but we're stuck at 9 degrees at the moment, and that's cloudy skies just hovering overhead. Looking at the rest of the day, it's going to remain cloudy with showers expected sometime this morning, and we're looking at around 5 millimeters of rainfall, so don't forget the umbrella before you set out. The high for today will reach 12 degrees, and tonight we're going to see more of like the cloudy skies persist with a high chance of showers continuing, and the showers will likely peak up overnight, so keep in mind if you have plans for later today. I know I mentioned sunny skies in the northern part of the province. Brandon is currently seeing some rain. I also misspoke earlier. I said Steinbach was sunny, but actually Steinbach is actually cloudy, and showers should be beginning this morning. To summarize it all, I'll tell you cloudy skies, showers beginning this morning in Winnipeg, and 5 millimeters of rain expected, and we'll get to a high of 12 degrees.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk.
Yes, this morning, really the only issue in terms of the commute is up north near Flin Flon. Highway 10 from just south of Flin Flon, from Baker's Narrows to Highway 39 is closed both ways because, of course, that wildfire in the area. But other than that, if you do see something going on down south here or anywhere else in the province on the highways, the bike lanes, sidewalks, give me a call on that CBC commuter line. Let me know what you're seeing. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, 7:14 is the time right now, and to serious matters that are ongoing in our community as the trial for Jeremy Skibicki carries on. The details being revealed in court have been disturbing. His defense team is arguing that even though he admits to killing 4 Indigenous women, he is not criminally responsible. Mental health support is now being provided to the victims' families who've been present in court. But the media coverage, of course, and the stories that we're covering here to try to keep you up to date on what's going on in the trial includes some really horrific details of the case. And that is difficult for all of us, but it's especially difficult for other Indigenous families to hear. Anna Huard is the committee member of the MMIW G2S Plus Implementation Advisory Committee and is here to talk about that. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us via Zoom. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
How difficult, in your view, has this Skibiki case been for families specifically of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls to be absorbing, watching all this?
I think to say earth-shattering is probably an understatement. This is such a high-profile case that it's, I believe it's a constant kind of reminder that their life has been turned upside down. And it's very difficult to sort of leave the reality of it, you know?
What type of cultural care do these families need, and what kinds of things have been helping people?
It sparked a lot of gatherings, vigils, rallies even. It's quite unfortunate that we have to gather like this, but community is really coming together and holding each other up, which is bittersweet.
What are you hearing specifically from Indigenous communities about how they're coping in a wider way? And also, of course, each individual is going to be different. Each family is going to be different. Some may want, the need for privacy. So what's it been like to figure out, how to reach out and then where to give space?
We listen a lot to the families and communities. So, for example, we were asked to help organize a vigil prior to the case with the Myron family. And so we're really guided by community and family and just ensuring that they're uplifted in times of need and of course giving space when we can.
Has there what's the role of elders been in the conversation, and also of knowledge keepers and those who lead sweats and such?
We've been very fortunate to have a lot of elders and knowledge holders come in and really guide families in times of need. Specifically on the implementation committee, or its traditional name is Giganaway Namananig for the committee. We've really had some wraparound support. For example, our elders fan down the families and supporters. There's, we take a lot of guidance from them, and I'm very, very I'm blessed for sure to have them in my presence. I believe we all are.
The details of this case are, as I keep, repeating, they are graphic. Obviously, it's traumatizing for people who have not experienced as well losing a loved one to murder. How can the larger community, what's the role of the larger community in rallying around the families in an appropriate way?
I think just the biggest thing, my biggest suggestion is show up. Show up for rallies, show up for vigils, repost on social media and educate your family and friends, like really get that good grasp on the impacts of colonial violence and sort of that bigger picture. Show up to the camps, Camp Morgan, Camp Mercedes, bring supplies, propane, wood, food and canned goods. And then on a kind of bigger scale, please donate to initiatives that support missing and murdered families.
What would you want the general public to know, people listening this morning in Manitoba, about what community care means from an Indigenous perspective?
I think I would say just keep in mind, like, all my relations, right? We're all here on this big earth, and that life is a beautiful thing, and that our differences make us special.
Anything to add this morning about particular pages or things that you want to mention for the public to know as this, the trial, is ongoing?
Yeah, it can be triggering for a lot of people. So I think the biggest thing you can do is like take a step back when you can, and that's a privilege, right? To be able to shut off, because a lot of families who are impacted can't. It's very difficult. So self-care, get outside, A colleague of mine says, going on the land fills your cup, like your emotional cup. Take that alone time when you need.
Anna, thank you very much for being with us this morning via Zoom. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Marcy.
That's Anna Huart, is a committee member of the MMIW G2S Plus Implementation Advisory Committee. So just a reminder here, support is available for anyone affected by these reports and the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous people overall as well. So immediate emotional assistance and crisis support is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The national hotline that we like to remind you of is 1-844-413-6649.
The goalie who revolutionized hockey, the bravery of Lucille Ball.
And get a great big bottle of Vitamin tomorrow.
And Larry David, well, being Larry. Shut up! Sometimes Terry O'Reilly finds great stories in his research books that didn't quite fit into regular episodes. Until now. Bookmarks 2024 on Under the Influence. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
7:21 a.m. is the time right now. I want to mention we're going to be on location actually this week. So on Thursday morning, our plan is to be on location in Osborne Village. So what is the future of Osborne Village when it comes to residents, when it comes to businesses? We're going to hear from longtime business owners, also hoping to touch base with some who are planning to move into the neighborhood and do business. And of course, we reported last week that there were some concerns around some violent activities outside the liquor store, specifically at River and Osborne, that iconic intersection. And there's just been a lot of discussion about Osborne Village, the proposal to have a pedestrian scramble, which is something that is right now at least not going to be happening. But it is a large area of Winnipeg, once, of course, in the past voted one of the most vibrant neighborhoods in all of the country. So what's the future of Osborne Village, and what are the current challenges facing business owners and residents there now? So we're going to be live at Little Sister Coffee, and that is right at River and Osborne, pretty much, just a couple of doors down from that intersection. So we'll be there on Thursday if you want to join us, or if you want to join the conversation and weigh in anytime. 788-3205 is where you can reach us on the listener line. It also does happen to be the morning of our regular monthly interview with Mayor Scott Gillingham, so he'll be part of that program as well. It is 9 degrees and mostly cloudy in Winnipeg, as we've been mentioning. The next fire update coming up at 7:30. Not much has changed overnight with the size of the fires. We do have power restored to Baker's Narrow, but not yet to Cranberry Portage. A little bit of music this morning from the 11th album from Jake Nickel, who went all out to create every single part himself, all the music. That's including creating his own equipment to capture the sound. Here's what he came up with. The latest album's Lonely Mission. This is music for no one.
He was busy making music for no one, playing it down, keeping it fun. He didn't want to go around asking for favors, stuck to the ground, stayed out of the sun. He's making music for no one. They say artwork needs an audience, but he would disagree. He'd sing for the birds and the cats on the street. He wasn't interested in making much money. Thought that all of the fuss meant that no one was free. He's making music for no one. He said these days we're all advertisers, trying to make ourselves known. So what is shown? We've put wrapping paper on an empty package. There's a cart but no horse. Why would I jump on board? I'd rather walk anyways. wasn't around. His name had no buzz. He only really liked the creative process. The rest was a game, another high school test. He's making music for no one. He said these days we're all advertisers.
Jake Nickel making music for no one from his new album Lonely Mission. Kind of a funny little tune there. Hey, Scott Regard?
Yeah, I like it. It's kind of a bit of the irony the Bare Naked Ladies used to have back in the day and others.
Yeah.
Social commentary,
Yeah,
right?
I can hear that. Well, I'll tell you what sucks when you're playing sports for no one, but that is not the case in what we're going to be talking about this morning. Let's start with soccer, where Canada's men's team finally has a new coach, right?
Yeah, we've been waiting almost a year now, Marcy, since John Herdman resigned over frustration with Soccer Canada and all of its political infighting. Enter Jesse Marsh, an American with experience coaching in MLS as well as in top European leagues. Marsh has been hired to see the Canadian team through its home World Cup in 2026. Marsh was asked about the strengths of the side.
This player pool has both athleticism and intelligence. The combination will provide us with an opportunity to be able to compete against the best teams in the world. And so, yeah, I mean, it will take time for it all to come together completely in the way that I want it to. But I really, really believe that this is a really good fit for me and for this player pool.
The likes of Jonathan David, Tejan Buchanan, and Alphonso Davies, Marcy, better like running. Marsh is a fitness-first coach, one whose teams in Leeds and in Leipzig were dangerous on the attack, but equally vulnerable on the counterattack. So it's not going to be boring, but it also will not be cheap for Soccer Canada. So just how did the cash-strapped organization pay for him? Well, it enlisted the Vancouver Whitecaps, FC Montreal, and Toronto FC's owners to pay his salary. Thus, Marsh's formal title is going to be MLS Canada Men's National Team Head Coach. So Major League Soccer gets some added branding, Marcy, when North America hosts the world's biggest sporting event in a couple of years' time. That branding will only have value if Marsh wins, of course. And looking at his first three matches in charge of Canada, that's going to be a tall task. The Canadians face, and I'm not kidding here for those who follow footy, the Netherlands, France, and Argentina over the next month or so. 3 of the top 7 teams on the planet. Good luck, Jesse Marsh. He's going to need it.
Let's go to the pool, where Canada's top swimmers are busy trying to qualify for this summer's Olympics right now.
Yeah, and to the surprise of no one, Marcy, Summer McIntosh met the required time for Paris last night, racing in the 400-meter freestyle. The teenage phenom received a huge ovation from her hometown Toronto crowd and led by a full body length after just 50 meters in the water. Another heavy favorite, Maggie McNeil, won the 100-meter butterfly. McNeil's the defending Olympic champion in that discipline. But just behind her, and qualifying for her first ever individual Olympic race, was Quebec's Marie-Sophie Harvey.
I saw Maggie kind of close, and I was like, ooh, that's good. Throughout my career, I had lots of ups, lots of down, and now I'm in a state that I just love swimming, and I just want to enjoy, because it's just a sport, right? Sometimes we get over our head, and it's like, oh my God, but you just need to have fun, and then what happens, what happens. You can't control anything.
And CBC continues its live stream of the Canadian Olympic swimming trials today, including Winnipeg's Kelsey Waugh competing in the 100-meter breaststroke, hoping to clinch a spot in the Paris Olympics herself.
And finally, what's the latest from the hockey playoffs?
Well, in the PWHL, Toronto missed a chance to book a spot in the final yesterday. Coach Troy Ryan, Marcy, did not mince words after a 2-0 loss in Minnesota. I wouldn't say any of us were very happy with that performance. We can chalk it up as our worst of the year. I just said to the group that for 26 games this year, this team has played great. Honestly, have been a top team in this league and a team that a lot of teams probably mirror themselves after. So I'm quite confident that we can just turn the page on this and be ready for Game 4. That contest goes tomorrow, and whether star Natalie Spooner is able to play in it remains to be seen, Marcy. Spooner, the league's leading scorer, took a nasty hit along the boards. She had to crawl off the ice and did not return, so we'll wait for news there. We'll also see the latest game between the Canucks and Oilers tonight. Vancouver, surprisingly enough, leading that series 2-1. because of their young goalie, the third stringer Artur Silovs. He has outdueled the likes of Stuart Skinner, who may not tend the net for the Oilers tonight. There's a lot of talk that it's probably going to be their backup, Calvin Pickard, playing. So we'll wait and see.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
You bet.
Scott Regehr with Morning Sports. Do you have a traffic note here? Eastbound Academy at Wellington, a stalled car blocking the median lane, so stay right. Just starting to back up. Might be about 5-10 minute delay to get through that area. Thanks, Pam, for calling the commuter line. 788-3093 is where you can leave tips under a gray sky Tuesday morning. And coming up, we're going to talk about blue skies, not gray skies, and sunflowers, don't you know? From Altona, we'll talk about the latest picture on a Canada Post stamp. We're going to have the photographer on behind that new stamp. Stay tuned. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is cloudy and 9. Get set for some damp weather. Showers beginning this morning, about 5 millimeters. Today's high, a modest 12. Manitoba's premier is expected to head north today to meet with fire evacuees and get a better sense of the extent of damage near Cranberry Portage. CBC's Brittany Greenslade is up near the community with the latest.
Premier Wab Kinew is flying into the community this morning to meet with evacuees in town and get an update from fire officials. During question period, Kinew vowed unconditional support for displaced residents and fire crews battling the blaze. Manitoba Hydro crews have completed a helicopter patrol of the area burning near Cranberry Portage. It found extensive damage due to wildfires. While crews are on the ground now, there is still no estimated time for restoration. Power remains out in the area, and there is no cell and internet service in nearby Flin Flon. As you can imagine, we talked to many people who are stressed, especially since there's no word on when people can go back home. We're told a few dozen crews from Ontario were set to arrive last night and today to help with the fight. Brittany Greenslade, CBC News, near Cranberry Portage.
Well, about 550 people from Cranberry Portage spent a third night out of their homes because of that wildfire. Many are staying in the Paw, including Carolyn Gibbons and her husband. They have lived in Cranberry Portage for almost 50 years. Gibbons says when they arrived by convoy Saturday night, there were no hotel rooms. Her husband cold called a contact in his phone, and Gibbons says the people were total strangers to her.
We are stuck. By any chance, do you have a spare bed or room or space for us? Because we've got nothing. Nobody.
Thank you. Stepped up right away.
Yeah.
Said, come on over.
And they just live 5 minutes from here. Okay. And within that time period, they had already made up their spare bedroom for us.
Gibbons now has a hotel room in the Paw. She says she can't leave because she has a medical appointment in town, which she has waited 10 months for later this week. An evacuation order, meanwhile, in BC has been issued for the entire Doig River First Nation Reserve. That is in northeast BC. There's a nearby wildfire. Officials say it's grown to about 250 hectares. Sharon Nickel is with the Prince George Fire Centre.
Most of that growth is attributed to obviously the dry conditions on site, but they have been experiencing a wind event in the area.
The town of Fort Nelson, BC, also has been evacuated because of a wildfire threat, and flames are moving closer to that town. In Alberta, there are also some wildfires threatening communities. You can hear all the latest on the wildfire situation coming up on World Report at 8. The city of Winnipeg is working with the Red Cross to provide more than 130 people with food and lodging. Hundreds of people who lived at Birchwood Terrace were suddenly forced out last week. The steel columns holding the St. James apartment building up had severely corroded, making it unsafe. Cheyenne Carrier lived there with her mother. She says work was being done in the basement for weeks, and the owner, she says, should have warned them of the risk.
It's just unethical. I feel like the moment they started doing work, the most humane thing would have been to let us know. We are human beings. We have the right to know what was going on in our home.
The city says decisions on the future of Birchwood Terrace are up to the property owner. Ladco Company declined CBC's request for an interview, but says it is working to, quote, bring these apartments back online. The children's section at a South Winnipeg library is missing a large chunk of its ceiling. Tape tarps and hoses are nestled between bookshelves at Fort Garry Public Library. A recycling bin catches drips from a leak over the computer lab. It's been like this for 2 years, and it frustrates library advocates like Joe Curnow of the group Millennium for All.
It's so emblematic of the neglect that the city is comfortable with.
City officials say they are investigating the damage, but don't have a timeline for repairs. They say repairs are based on budget, urgency, and need. A 2023 report from the city compared Edmonton, Calgary, and Regina's libraries to Winnipeg's, and it found Winnipeg spends the least amount of money on libraries per capita. The city of Winnipeg wants to grant historic status to a very famous foot. The Boy with the Boot is a bronze statue at the entrance to the English Garden in Assiniboine Park. The city wants to add it to its list of historic resources. That statue was commissioned by the city back in 1897. It has since been moved several times. The statue has also been repeatedly vandalized and was even stolen in the 1990s. It was returned after a few months. You can read more about the Boy with the Boot, even see a photo on our website, as well as other news. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells in our news department this morning at CBC on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. It is 7:35 AM. It's time for our regional forecast with Abby Adiemi.
9 degrees in Winnipeg and cloudy skies, expecting showers throughout the day, totaling about 5 millimeters of rainfall. The high for today will reach 12 degrees with winds shifting from the east this afternoon, and tonight we're going to see more showers. Heading west to Brandon, where it's 6 degrees, already light rain showers expected throughout the day, amounting to about 10 to 15 millimeters and a high of 11. Thompson is at 1 and partly cloudy. Today we'll see some mainly sunny conditions later, and we'll be getting to a high of 15. Further north in Churchill, where it's -5 and mainly clear, it's also going to be another sunny day for that part of the province, reaching a high of 4 degrees. Dauphin is at 6 and cloudy showers expected to begin this morning. Dauphin is expecting around 5 millimeters and will be heading to a high of 9. Gimli is currently at 8 degrees and seeing cloudy conditions. The Interlake region expects showers this morning, also heading to 11. Now Steinbach and Morris both stuck at 9 degrees. It's cloudy over there and we'll be seeing showers beginning this morning, and both will be getting to a high of 13. Expect cloudy conditions for the city. Some showers more across Manitoba, and we'll be getting to a high of 12 in Winnipeg today.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you can just feel the rain out there. Corey, what's going on in the commute?
Yeah, Eastbound Academy, right at Wellington. Got a call from Pam in the left lane. There's a stalled car, so keep right to get around that. She said delays are starting to build. Might take you about 5 to 10 minutes to get through there. So just a heads up if you are heading eastbound Academy, might see some delays. Thanks for that call, Pam. Also, of course, looking up north, the highways, Highway 10 south of Flin Flon. You do want to look out there, because just from Baker's Narrows, Highway 10 to the intersection with Highway 39 is closed because of that forest fire. I'm sure lots of people in there are well aware of that, but just letting folks know. If you see something else going on, though, here in the city on the highways, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Hey, you just got off the phone live with someone up in the fire zone we're going to be talking to after 8, right?
That's right. Rebecca Johnson, who's been planning those meals in the PA. She just stepped up, just got this idea popped into her head on Sunday as folks started coming in to town, and she thought she was just going to feed folks. To end up feeding 600 people on Sunday, and now it's become a daily thing. It's kind of taken on a life of its own. So we're going to have her on to chat about that.
So we'll find out how the people are coming together to help evacuees. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
It is 22 minutes to 8 o'clock. I should also mention Brittany Greenslade, our reporter, remains in Swan River this morning. She's been traveling back and forth to the fire zone. She actually was in Cranberry Portage yesterday to get a look at things as well. She will join us live, not live. She will join us. You'll hear her report after 8 o'clock. So we are going to reach her this morning, but we'll get her on the air for you after 8 o'clock, so you'll be able to hear her full report. It is right now 7:38 a.m., 22 minutes to 8 a.m. on your Tuesday morning. And while the sky might be really gray and getting ready for rain this morning, I want you to close your eyes and think about our most beautiful prairie skies, the kind of endless blue that is only captivated in a more beautiful way when there are sunflowers, yellow sunflowers that are dancing in the wind. That is a typical image of a serene prairie field, those vibrant yellow sunflower fields, the sky in the backdrop. And what I'm describing is also one of the pictures that's been chosen for Canada Post's latest stamp series called From Far and Wide. Mike Grandmaison is the person who took that photo in Altona, Manitoba. He's a longtime photographer. This is actually his 10th image that has been used by Canada Post for a stamp project. And he joins us via Zoom. And we've also got a number of the stamps. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see some of the past ones that we'll talk about too. Hi there.
Good morning, Marcy.
How did you get into doing this in the first place? Because you weren't always taking photographs for stamps, right?
No, that's for sure. I mean, once I graduated from university in biology, I actually worked in forestry and biological sciences for about 20 years. And then in 1996, I saw an opportunity to follow my passion, which had been photography at that point, and get into photography. So I've been doing photography freelance professionally on a full-time level since 1996.
Amazing. Can you tell us about the photos that are behind you? You're with us via Zoom this morning. So are those your images as well?
Yes, those are a couple of images of trees. One of the things that I really enjoyed doing was photographing nature, and that certainly encompassed trees. And the one on my left is a photograph of some spruce trees up in Clearwater Lake in the Paw, and the other one is up in Nopalming Provincial Park, some spruce trees there.
Gorgeous colors. I mean, the oranges and the vibrant greens, they're both very different. I have trees all over my home as well, so I just love that. How does Canada Post, do you submit the scene, or do they commission you for a stamp?
Both, actually. I think 3 or 4 of the stamps were commissioned, and the others came in from requests from images from the library. So they either Canada Post, member Canada Post, or a photo researcher, or sometimes it's also graphic designers who will contact people that they know who might have these photographs, depending on the subject matter that's required.
Do you still this is your 10th one, but do you still get a thrill when you see your stamp being used?
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, this one here, it's a bit of time in the making, and I think it was about 3-4 years ago, I think, that I actually kind of started. And so we had to keep these projects hush-hush, until the day it's released. And so I've known about this for at least a couple of years now, that this thing was going to happen until last Monday. So
let's pull up the photo here. It's probably already, I know the photos have probably already been moving on YouTube, but just in case. So we're talking about the latest one, and it is the one from Altona. Just gorgeous. Were you sitting in a field or on the side of the highway when you took this? Because it almost looks like half the photo is the image of the sunflowers, and then half is our gorgeous prairie sky.
Well, a lot of my photography, I'm a landscape photographer primarily, I guess. And so I like to combine not just the nature subjects I'm photographing, but also the sky. I'm always considerate of the sky above. And so it's always a balance of what you're trying to get. But basically, I was just on a routine. This one here was just a routine photographic outing to photograph agriculture, which I done a lot over the years. And so this just happened to be, to see this beautiful scene, and stopped and got in the field and photographed it.
Gorgeous. Which one is your first stamp?
The first stamp actually was a Christmas light series, which was a combination. It was actually a composite. There were 3 stamps, and they were composite images from 3 different photographers. Myself, Dave Reed, also from Winnipeg, and Malik Karsh, who was the half brother of the famous Karsh. So this was done by Circle Design of Winnipeg, and I think Rob Peters had actually composed, taken different images, and some of them, you'll see my Northern Lights, and others you'll see some snowbanks, and others you'll see some trees or forest tree line, that kind of thing. So it was an interesting collage.
And they're very stylized, so different from that pure nature photography. We're looking at them now on YouTube if people are looking, and the figures are sort of shadowy, superimposed. The lights are really popping out in just beautiful colors in this series, which makes sense, as you said, because it was a collaboration. These are not all Manitoba photos, though, or maybe they are, but the lighthouse here is not Manitoba.
No, that's Cap de Rosier in Quebec. And the other one that's not in Manitoba is actually also in Quebec, and that's for the Double Rainbow in Saint-Gédéon in northern Quebec.
And so do you take those on your travels and submit them, or do you are you always, as a photographer, you're always taking shots wherever you are?
Well, yeah, that's as a photographer, as a nature photographer, I've spent 48 years at this point photographing exclusively Canada. And so, I traveled different parts of of Canada at different times of, different years. So some year I may travel to make 2 or 3 different trips, and others, may make more. So yeah, you're always photographing, you're always keeping something in mind, and it's just you never always often don't have anything in particular in mind, but you're photographing a nice scene, and then you build it up in your library of images, and then when requests come, then you've got images to show.
You've got ones of the Red River Settlement here, and then there's a University of Manitoba collage. It looks like. Tell me a little bit about that series.
Well, that one came back fairly early as well, and that was to commemorate the 125th anniversary of the University of Manitoba. And that was actually my colleague from Circle Design, again, Robert, who actually knew somebody who was doing the work, and so was suggested that I, to this graphic designer in Halifax, that maybe, contact me and I could do the photography perhaps. And so that's how it came about. So I photographed the main building, the administration building. And then at the same time, they also wanted to feature some of the research that was going on. So I got to photograph one of the canola researchers as well. And this was just around the time as well of 9/11. And so there was the silhouetted figure at the top is actually a student that was graduating, studying, crisis during the ISIS stuff that was going on in 9/11.
Oh, interesting. So that student may in fact recognize themselves in that collage.
Yeah.
They have a good eye for their silhouette. I just realized, Mike, that one of your photos I'm very up close and personal with because I got through the pandemic doing puzzles. And I do believe that this particular photo of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, and you have a series of 2 of them, so one is sort of further away, but I'm talking about the close-up one, is a puzzle as well. I've done this puzzle of your image of the museum.
I'm not even familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's amazing, all of these photos you've done. Just lastly, of course, the reason for us talking about all of your stamps is the most current one that just came out of Altona, the sunflower field. What's the reaction been from people in Altona about the photo and the stamp? Have you heard anything?
Well, I've heard from the local station. I did an interview there last week as well, and a number of folks actually. From Friesens, the famous printers in Altona. I've done at least a dozen projects there as well, so a lot of people know me from there. So I've received quite a few notes from there, and friends from across the country as well.
Thank you very much for telling us about this this morning. Really appreciate having you on.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
That is Mike Grandmaison with us on CBC this morning, live via Zoom. He's a local photographer. His photos have been featured on Canada Post stamps, including the latest. It just came out within the last week. It's on the Canada Post stamp series called From Far and Wide, and it is a gorgeous picture of the sunflower fields in Altona.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1. Local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
Time right now is 12 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Marcy Marcusa on 89.3. It is 9 degrees in the city of Winnipeg. It's 6 over in Brandon with light rain. Our sky is heavy with thick cloud in Winnipeg, and we are expecting the rain here maybe to start around noontime. We're just watching the system. We are expecting about 5 millimeters. So don't forget the umbrella, extra jackets this morning, all that stuff. And a high of 12 degrees is what we're going to get. It's going to stay rainy and showery into into tonight, and then into tomorrow, showers as well, with a risk of an afternoon thunderstorm, and periods of rain into Thursday as well. So really rainy week here in southern Manitoba. Hopefully some of that will get to the north as well, where that wildfire continues to burn. Not much change in the situation this morning, by the way. About 32,000 hectares burning around Flin Flon and Cranberry Portage. Still, all of the residents have been evacuated. They still remain out of their homes. Hydro is not yet restored to Cranberry Portage, but it has been restored to Baker's Narrows. So that is pretty much the latest developments. But we are going to hear from Brittany Greenslade. She's been up north this week. She's in Swan River, where she's staying. Hotels are so full, as you can imagine, because of what's happening there, that she found a spot in Swan River, which is about 2 hours south of Cranberry. So she actually got, of the Paw rather, she actually did get into Cranberry Portage, though, to have a look at the structures and how the firefight is going there. So we're going to have her on the program coming up after 8 o'clock live here on CBC. So stay with us. Well, right now, speaking of what has been going on in the fire zone, the dry conditions that we've had in our province leading up to this have been a huge challenge for firefighters who are battling these wildfires. The entire community, as mentioned, of Cranberry Portage, those evacuations happening Saturday. In case you're trying to place it on a map, it's about 585 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg. Manitoba Wildfire Services Director Earl Simmons updated reporters at a news conference yesterday afternoon. He said that the fire started with a lightning strike that happened on Thursday, and then it quickly spread.
I've been working in wildfire for 40 years. I've never seen a fire move like this fire moved. We get calls, why didn't you do something to stop it? We used water bombers from both Manitoba and Saskatchewan to protect people's property. Life was the first priority, and then property. And quite frankly, we just couldn't put people in front of the path of that fire at that speed.
That was Earl Simmons, the director of Manitoba Wildfire Services. So Brian Amiro is with us via Zoom now, Professor Emeritus at the University of Manitoba's Department of Soil Science. And he's here to break down some of the environmental factors that are contributing to the wildfires we're seeing. Good morning.
Good morning.
So help us understand when you're hearing there, and experienced firefighters saying, that they've never seen things spread at this speed, and what's going on with the land to make this happen.
Sure. So what often happens across the prairies in Manitoba, we'll have a cold front come through. So that's just a straight weather front. And on that cold front, we often have storms. So our most likely scenario is that a storm will happen with lightning and we get lots of rain. But once in a while, we get these fronts coming through that have no rain, but still have lightning or very little rain. After that front passes through, we get a strong northwest wind. In this particular case, we have a caused by lightning. Basically, we call it dry lightning, so not much rain came with it. That strong northwest wind then drove that fire after ignited very quickly. And if you look on the map, you can see it. It's sort of long from that northwest to southeast direction. So it moved very, very quickly with those very strong winds.
So when we're hearing across the country this year that it's going to be a bad wildfire season, and that even underneath the snow that there was sort of fires sort of simmering still and ready to go, is that the case here? Or no, this is lightning strike, and as you're describing, the winds then push it across the dry land?
Sure. So across the boreal forest, and especially in Western Canada, we can get spring fires that are very vigorous. So what happens basically is after that snow melts, we'll have dry fuel, basically that dry grass that hasn't greened up yet. And if that gets ignited, then we see that fire can spread very quickly. So we have that dry grass situation in the spring. It's especially noticeable in Alberta, but happens in Saskatchewan and Manitoba also. But also what happens in the spring is that if you think about that landscape has a mixture of coniferous trees like spruces and pine and deciduous species like aspen or poplar. And in the spring, those aspen trees don't have their leaves on yet. So what that really means is that in the middle of the summer, often the aspen trees can hold some moisture in, and that sort of helps that fire not to move quite so quickly. But at the moment in the spring, there's no canopy up there at the moment. The sunlight is shining through, it's drying out that surface fuel, and wind can get in there a little more easily. So at the landscape level, we have this mixture of coniferous species and aspen, and we can see those spring fires move very, very quickly sometimes.
How does this compare to Manitoba fires in previous years? Is it early for us in the season, for example? And can you put the size of this in context? We're hearing about 1,000 hectares.
Right. So it's a very large fire. So often in Canada, we say if fires get larger than 200 hectares, we classify them as a large fire. When these fires get larger than 10,000 hectares, they just become really, really difficult to manage. So we end up having a different strategy at this point when they get so large. So you can imagine this fire is sort of in length, tens of kilometers long, and it's very narrow at the moment because it was driven by the wind. So the risk for firefighters right now, or the strategy, is that if that wind shifts, so it's been going northwest to southeast, you can imagine now you've got a really long line in that dimension. If you had a wind that shifts from the southwest, we then have this big fire front that can open up. So usually the suppression people are trying to make sure that secondary sides are not going to be a problem for that fire to grow.
And is it early in the season or not?
So after snowmelt, we can have fires that grow. What we always hope is that we're going to have some rain in there. So typically we get more rain in the spring, especially through June, but that doesn't always happen. We're coming from a very dry year last year. So 2023 was very dry, and we didn't have a lot of snowpack. Now, deep ground in the soil, we still have quite a bit of moisture. But when you get a strong wind and dry fuels on the surface, those fires still move very, very quickly.
They're going to go.
So this happens occasionally. We see, especially in Alberta, spring fires tend to be the worst. Manitoba, typically summer's the worst for us, but we can still get these spring events as you see now.
So let me ask you this, because we had a resident up there yesterday rightfully saying, this is northern Manitoba, we're surrounded by forest. And that resident was saying, we need better protocols for dealing with this. What's the best way to get ahead of something when a fire is spreading in the way that you've described, and a lightning strike can cause something this quickly to become catastrophic?
Sure. So clearly we're trying to protect communities, and local fire agencies work with that all the time. But in the greater forest, there's just a lot of land out there. And we can get situations with a lot of lightning strikes. So I'll give you an example. I remember looking one day at a map for just the province of Alberta. In a 24-hour period, there were 10,000 lightning strikes. So you can imagine not all those are going to start fires, but how would you actually get to all those fires? It's very, very difficult. So the agencies try to get to them, try to put them out when they're small. But again, with a strong wind, these can take off very quickly.
What should the public know? Obviously, lightning strikes we can't control, but what should the public understand about their own behaviors if they are going to be? We're heading into the long weekend. There's going to be people still, especially down south here. There's going to be people that are going to be camping and such.
Sure. So, of course, we worry about people starting fires, and that's something we're trying to control all the time. Our very large fires across northern Canada are often started by lightning. We have areas that we try to suppress them if they're near communities. If they're very far north, we just don't even bother trying. So we are looking at those values. So things like hydro lines, communities, human health, those are all very critical for people to protect. When it's dry, obviously don't start fires. That's just going to be an issue on ignition. I like people to think that we actually live on a fire planet. So you can imagine we've got fuel, we've got oxygen, and we have ignition sources. And then you can look at maps across northern Canada, and you can see that our forest burns quite regularly.
Do you have a sense of what kind of a year specifically we're expecting in Manitoba for wildfires this year?
So what we always hope, it really depends on local rains, and that really makes that difference. So when we get a large fire like this one, we're really hoping we're going to get some rain events. They're going to slow that fire spread. Even if those rains don't put that fire out right away, it's slowing that spread that's very critical.
Yep.
So it really depends on the local weather. Now, having said that, we do look at cumulative things like we say a drought code. How dry has it been? And of course, it is abnormally dry across Western Canada this year. But typically, because we have a snowpack, even if it's a small snowpack in the north, that does sort of make that not quite as bad as far as burning deeply. But again, the surface fuels can be dry, and that fire can spread very quickly with the wind.
So we'll wait and see. Brian, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Let's go to the news now for the latest on the fires. Heather?
Good morning. Yes, well, Premier Rob Canoe is heading into the fire zone in northwest Manitoba today. That massive wildfire still threatening Cranberry Portage. It's burning about 1.5 kilometers out of the town. Some 550 people have been forced out. Officials at the Premier's office say Rob Canoe plans to visit areas where many evacuees are staying. And in Fort Garry, people want action on their leaky library. The roof of the Fort Garry Public Library has been leaking for the past 2 years, causing damage in a number of areas. We'll hear more in our next news at 8:30.
By the way, we were talking there with Brian Amiro, the professor emeritus at the University of Manitoba's Department of Soil Science. Brittany Greenslade from Swan River coming up.
On Q with Tom Power.
System of a Down lead singer Serge Tankian has a new memoir called Down with the System. Serge will tell you about the origins of his activism, how System of a Down got on the radio in the first place, and why it's kind of impossible to write and record new music with his band.
I feel blessed for it, but it doesn't mean that things should continue forever either.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Would you try oysters with kiwi? That is just one of the flavor combinations suggested by artificial intelligence that restaurants are trying out to see if humans actually find them tasty. AI and food coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Officials in BC say the weather will be a major factor in efforts to control the Parker Lake fire. They say the situation near Fort Nelson is extremely challenging and volatile. The fire is still about 2 kilometers from the town. Rob Fraser is mayor of the region. He is confident the flames will not destroy any buildings.
The structural support crews of the BC wildfire are amazing. They have got huge tanks set up, and they've got hoses strung out. So if any of those structures do catch on fire, we'll be Johnny on the spot with water and with pumpers and with personnel to try to put those fires out immediately.
More than 4,000 people have evacuated to Fort St. John, but a new wildfire near there is forcing more people to leave their homes. About 100 people from Doig River First Nation are under an evacuation order. Officials say there is no imminent threat to homes. Sharon Nickel is with the BC Wildfire Service.
Not only is the fire located on the north side of the river, so the opposite side from the community, it's actually growing away from the community right now.
Doig River First Nation is about 40 kilometers from Fort St. John. Michael Cohen is expected back in a New York court. He is testifying at Donald Trump's hush money trial. Trump's former lawyer and fixer is the key witness for the prosecution's case against the former U.S. president. Chris Reyes is following the case in New York. And Chris, Michael Cohen has been one of the most anticipated witnesses of this trial. What has he said so far?
Okay, so Michael Cohen didn't share anything on the stand that we haven't heard before. He's talked extensively about what he's done, but the prosecution is relying on Cohen to thread all of the separate pieces together that form the entire basis of their case. So the scheme to kill damaging stories about Trump, the hush money payment that facilitated that scheme, and allegedly falsifying business records to hide that payment, and then to do this while keeping it from voters ahead of the 2016 election. On the stand, Cohen talked about playing a part in all of that at the, quote, direction of and benefit of Mr. Trump. And what's really notable is Cohen explained that Trump's reaction to the Daniels story had nothing to do with his family finding out, but only worrying about his campaign, that Trump told him, "This is a disaster. Women are going to hate me." The prosecution wanted to go about this methodically to give a clear play-by-play of how these alleged crimes may have taken place.
When the prosecution finishes their questioning, Trump's attorneys will have their turn to question Cohen. What might we see there?
Well, by all accounts, Cohen was calm and measured on the stand yesterday, so it'll be interesting to see if the cross-examination will have a different effect. Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, has described Michael Cohen to this jury as someone with a track record of lying, someone who can't be trusted. The defense should be up to question him this afternoon.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes in New York. Georgia's parliament has just approved a controversial law. A crowd of protesters outside the legislative building in Tbilisi react with anger to the vote. The divisive law requires NGOs and media organizations to register with the government if more than 20% of their funding comes from abroad. Critics say the measure threatens Georgia's democratic freedoms. Victims' advocates want Ontario Police Services to change the way they investigate intimate partner violence. If the alleged perpetrator is a police officer, they want the Special Investigations Unit to take over. A recent CBC investigation found more than a third of police officers suspended in Ontario over the past decade faced allegations of gender-based violence. Julie Ireton has been digging into possible solutions.
I'm shaking. You can't talk about this.
This woman was a recent caller to CBC's Ontario Today. She says her husband, an Ontario police officer, was abusive. CBC isn't revealing her name for her own protection.
And when you do talk about it, people say, well, that's not possible. He's a police officer.
Several survivors and former cops tell CBC when an officer is accused of committing a crime, justice can be complicated, even risky. The executive director of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police says a chief can ask a neighboring police force to investigate, but that's not good enough for Leslie Bicos. She's a former constable. She now teaches sociology at King's University College in London, Ontario.
This idea of the police policing the police is hugely problematic.
Ontario's Special Investigations Unit is a civilian oversight agency. It looks into cases involving police where there's an injury, death, or alleged sexual assault, but not intimate partner violence. Kate Puttister says that's different from some other provinces. She's a professor at the University of Guelph.
The one in Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, and Saskatchewan also have explicit jurisdiction over intimate partner violence. Clearly, some other jurisdictions have made this determination. Intimate partner violence requires this independent investigation.
Ontario's SIU says it doesn't weigh in on policy matters. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Japan's Asahi Kasei Corporation is about to reveal it's building a lithium-ion battery separator plant in Port Colborne, Ontario. The CBC's Janice McGregor joins us from Ottawa with the details. And Janice, this is part of the rollout of Honda's $15 billion investment in Canada's electric vehicle supply chain. Walk us through this.
Marcia, when Honda made its big announcement, we were told that not only was it expanding its footprint in Alliston, Ontario, but the components for the Honda batteries were also going to be made in southwestern Ontario. Today, we can tell you that Port Colborne is one of the successful bidders as Asahi Kasei announces Canada's first lithium-ion separator plant. This technology is really important for the reliability and safety of electric vehicles, and this part of the process has never been made in Canada before. Honda is hoping to cut its battery manufacturing costs by 20% by setting up a very vertically integrated supply chain that's geographically concentrated in Ontario.
The federal and Ontario governments offered a lot of benefits to bring this plant to Ontario, but that is controversial.
That's right, $5 billion worth of controversial. One of the things we're listening for today is exactly what share this Port Colborne facility will get out of those government incentives. What promises have been made to this community in terms of job creation and local economic benefits in return? There have been skeptics about whether these big plays are worth it for taxpayers, including on the opposition bench. But yesterday, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland called on the Conservatives to pass the budget bills currently before the House to implement the investment tax credits.
It's not some abstract thing. Getting these credits passed into law is what we need to make investments like the Honda investment real.
Even as politicians are toasting this win for the Niagara region today, they also know that Winnipeg, for example, was in the running for this plant and missed out. There are sensitivities, particularly in Western Canada and Quebec, about how much focus Ontario's automotive sector is getting from the Trudeau government.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. Canada's Department of Fisheries and Oceans is watching a North Atlantic right whale in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The adult female is tangled in fishing gear. There are only about 360 of those whales still alive. And as Brett Ruskin tells us, Canada has changed its fishing practices to try to protect them.
With so few North Atlantic right whales left, scientists are able to give each a name. The latest one caught in fishing gear looks to be whale EG4510, or Sheila. Like past years, researchers have launched underwater acoustic gliders and flown small planes, crisscrossing the vast Gulf of St. Lawrence above and below the surface, looking and listening for whales. The North Atlantic right whales move into the area annually, likely following food north as waters warm up. But they're met with kilometers of vertical fishing lines from the crab and lobster industries. Snagging one of these lines can mean a whale gets weighed down by heavy equipment and ropes that tighten around their fins or mouth. Now that Sheila has been spotted, a roughly 2,000 kilometer zone around that location has been declared unfishable for 15 days using those conventional fixed lines. DFO says all crews have to lift their gear out of there to prevent any other entanglements. These rules are the same ones used last year. Inconvenient but necessary, according to some fishing crews. Inadequate, according to some conservation groups. Crews say if Sheila is spotted again and weather conditions are good, a disentanglement team may be deployed to try to free her. Brett Ruskin, CBC News, Halifax.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to your Tuesday. It's cloudy in Winnipeg, and we are expecting rain. Thanks for joining us. I'm Marcy Marcusa, as mentioned, and this is Information Radio on CBC. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, it is not growing, but it could take weeks to go out. We're talking about the fire in northern Manitoba. We're going to talk to Brittany Greenslade. We're going to hear her report this half hour. She has been up north. She's in Swan River this morning, and she did get into Cranberry Portage to have a look at things yesterday. She'll have the very latest report for us on the wildfire coming up, so stay with us. Also this half hour on the program, when you feel like you are helpless, at least you can feed people. That's what's happening in the Paw. People are coming together for big meals for hundreds that are being put on by some local residents there that are trying to help fire evacuees. So we're going to talk to one of the organizers there. So we'll have the very latest from what's happening with the fires in Manitoba. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells for other news that's developing in our province. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, people who were forced out of their apartments in St. James last week wonder why they were kept in the dark for weeks before their sudden evacuation. Engineers uncovered corrosion on multiple columns in the underground parkade at Birchwood Terrace, prompting fears that building could collapse. Mala Carrier lived at Birchwood and is angry the owner, Latco, didn't warn them of the danger. And putting its best foot forward, the city of Winnipeg is set to grant historic status to a 127-year-old bronze statue. The boy with the boot is at the entrance to the English Garden at Assiniboine Park, but that boot has been around town. Hear all about it coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Is it still a thing when you have a baby, Heather Wells, to bronze or have your actual baby shoes kept as a keepsake?
I mean, people might do that. I didn't do that just because I'm probably not organized enough, but I think maybe some people do that.
Do you know I have that?
Did you?
It's somewhere. It's somewhere in a keepsake box at home. I know it is. My mom gave it to me. It's my actual shoe from when I was a kid, and it has a hole in the toe, which I kind of love. So, yeah, but it was my actual shoe. Corey, you have that too?
I have one to my parents when Cal was born. They gave me my baby shoes. And the same thing, hold the toe from all the crawling I was doing.
Yeah.
So
it was a thing, I guess.
Yeah, it's
and seeing all I got was an old piece of hair of mine. It's like, ew, I don't want that.
But did you keep it?
No.
Oh.
As soon as she gave it to me, I think I just kind of took it quietly and put it in the garbage. I'm not keeping that.
Well, all morning you've been talking about the boy with the boot, and I just keep thinking about those bronzed baby shoes, right? All right, let's get into what's happening in the weather forecast. As I mentioned, the rain is going to come. It has already been raining in parts of Manitoba. Abby has our Winnipeg forecast.
We're still stuck at 9 degrees. It's cloudy out there, and we're expecting to see these cloudy conditions throughout the day, with showers beginning this morning close to the lunch period. period. We're going to see around 5 millimeters of rain in the Winnipeg area, and the wind is also something you need to take into consideration as it's going to be coming from the east this afternoon. We're going to reach a high of 12 degrees. As we move into the night period, those clouds in the skies will definitely stick around with a high chance of more showers in the evening, and then even more showers are expected to roll in overnight, and temperatures will be dipping at that point. And if we just have a sneak peek into tomorrow, it's shaping to be another wet one. We're anticipating showers throughout the day with a more significant amount of rainfall, around 10 to 15 millimeters. But today we're expecting cloudy conditions with showers, especially this morning, and we're heading to a high of 12.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
And with a couple of traffic notes, here's Corey.
Yeah, I got a call from Dennis on the commuter line. So westbound Marion is actually pretty backed up right now, at least past Archibald. And that seems to stem from construction happening right at that split with Goulet. He says there's construction in the median lane, but then as you kind of carry on down Goulet, it shifts over right around Desmurons to the curb lane that's closed. So I think a lot of people are just slowing down as they're kind of have to weave through that construction. Causes some pretty big backups on westbound Marion. Seems to be going at least past Archibald. So thanks for that call, Dennis, as well. Pam called Academy or Maryland, I guess, depending on how you want to see it, right at Wellington there, heading southbound. In the left lane, there is a stalled car. So keep right to get around that. That's also causing some backups for folks. If you see something else, though, going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, as you have been hearing, hundreds of people are still out of their homes and on edge. They're out of the community of Cranberry Portage as that wildfire continues to burn in northwestern Manitoba. It could last for weeks, thanks to the tinder dry conditions that we've had this year. Premier Wab Kinew, as you've been hearing in the news, plans to head to the region today. CBC reporter Brittany Greenslade has been covering the story near Cranberry Portage. She's been speaking with a number of evacuees and local fire officials. She spoke with me this morning at 7 o'clock with the latest report. She's staying in Swan River.
Good morning, Marcy.
So let's start with the Premier. What do we understand about the visit from Wab Kinew today?
Yeah, Marcy, WAB is flying into the community this morning to meet with evacuees in town and get an update from Incident Command. Now, Kinew has vowed unconditional support for displaced residents and fire crews battling the blaze. He mentioned that yesterday during question period. He also says he knows this is a difficult time for many in the province who are dealing with these wildfires, and he wanted them to know that the province has their back. Now, he went on to say that whatever dollar amount is needed to support people forced from their homes would be made available. The province has implemented a, quote, cross-departmental response in the face of this emergency. It means they're mobilizing staff from departments of families, finance, and health, all to help these evacuees. Supports are already in place, helping with medication deliveries and care services for people in need as well.
So I mentioned you're in Swan River. Can you sort of place us where you are right now and how things look and smell? What's it like?
Yeah, we're about 2 hours south of the Pas. It's actually the closest hotel room we could get. As you can imagine, evacuees are taking up all those spots, rightfully so. But you can smell that fire long before you ever see the smoke. We all know that smell too well. Those in Winnipeg were inundated with it over the weekend when they woke up on Sunday morning. And we're unable to find rooms, as I said, any closer to Cranberry Portage, so we're a few hours south. Yesterday when we were in the Pas, that was also what we heard from many evacuees. They were having trouble finding a place to stay. Now, the one thing we did hear, everyone is helping out. One woman we spoke with was able to get a room for just 2 nights, but as of yesterday morning, there was no space left. She was kicked out of her room. She says the Manitoba Métis Federation stepped in and was able to put her up at an employee's home for as long as she needs. We've heard from others who are opening their doors to those in need of space. The agricultural grounds in the Pas also opened up for people with RVs and campers. They turned on their power and water, and they've been hosting lunches and barbecues each day with support from local businesses in the community.
Well, the stressful part is the empty community. So what about Cranberry Portage? What's being done to protect people's homes?
Yeah, well, for a short period yesterday afternoon, Highway 10 opened, so we were able to actually get inside that fire zone. We saw crews working really hard, placing sprinklers on rooftops and around properties to keep those structures safe. As far as we know, no structures have been damaged yet. And we also saw them just working to keep the forest safe as well. And as much as that, we've heard that it is people first, then property, and then forest. That is the order of priority. Now, this fire just started on Thursday. On Saturday evening, it took a really fast turn, which sparked that evacuation, and it's far from over. Provincial officials say this could continue to burn for weeks.
Now, you've spoken to many evacuees. What's the sense of how people are doing?
Yeah, Marcy, as you can imagine, many people are stressed, especially since there's no word on when they can go back home. Many say what was supposed to be a 2-hour evacuation notice turned into just minutes on Saturday evening when those winds quickly shifted. Now, the first has been moving quickly. The fire's been moving quickly, and officials have acted fast to keep people out of harm's way. Now, one man I spoke with was packing up his camper when the rush to leave hit. He realized he forgot his suitcase and all of his clothes, but there's more worry about whether or not people have homes to go back to. So far, again, as we said, we haven't heard of any major damage when it comes to structures, but gratefully so, people still concerned, many banding together, supporting each other. I spoke with Melissa Lundy. She and her husband actually stayed in Cranberry Portage. They didn't evacuate. They run the gas station, and they wanted to make sure people could still fuel up, and they've also been feeding the fire crews and teams working.
Tell me what you've been doing here for the past couple days.
Well, I've been alongside with my husband trying to get the pumps going. I'm trying to get the pumps going. No, he is. But just trying to keep things going. And then I started taking food out of the freezer to cook it for the guys, because they're no good to us if they have an empty stomach.
Has it been busy?
It has been busy with them coming and going, yes. And they all come at once. So, got to be prepared.
And what are you hearing from those crews? What have you been hearing from emergency crews and officials about the challenges with the ongoing firefight itself?
Yeah, well, we heard from the Manitoba Wildfire Service, the director, Earl Simmons, yesterday. He says the fire was really held steady since yesterday morning. It hasn't moved or gotten smaller. It's sitting at roughly around 32,000 hectares, and it's still about 1.5 kilometers away from town. Again, we haven't gotten an update since last night, so we're hoping that hasn't changed much. He says the fire was moving at an unbelievable speed, swallowing up land at a rate of around 2 kilometers an hour at the front and about 1 kilometer an hour on the sides. Now, he's been doing this for 40 years, and he says he's never seen a fire that has moved like this. And we know this is because of high winds, extremely dry conditions in the area, and we know help is on the way. About 50 firefighters currently fighting the wildfires. We heard from some volunteers that had actually come in to help, and another 55 that are coming in from outside Manitoba that were supposed to arrive last night and today.
What would you say people are most concerned about right now?
Yeah, Marcy, when they can go home. Nobody likes to be out of their house. Nobody likes to have that unknown when they can go back. So that's the biggest concern, and that the longer they have to stay out, where they'll stay for that real length of time and what they're going to have with them. Because as we said, people left with really just essentials and had to flee fast.
And what would you say is needed the most right now then?
Well, something you talked about a little earlier, rain. And there is some in the forecast. The biggest problems we've seen is those tinder dry conditions, drought issues we've been dealing with over those past few months. This has really helped the fire spread and those winds. So those did die down a bit overnight Sunday, which helped. We'll get an idea this morning of what we can expect. And we know Manitoba Hydro hard at work. There have been outages in Cranberry Portage all the way through to areas of Flin Flon that have been impacting people. Also telecommunications in Flin Flon. They don't have cell phone service or internet service. That's been intermittent since Saturday. But again, what we keep hearing, people are rallying together, and really it's that strength that everyone says is helping. Right now, people are just waiting on good news.
All right, Brittany, thank you so much for the report, and we'll of course hear from you throughout the day.
Thanks, Marcy.
That is CBC reporter Brittany Greenslade. She's in Swan River this morning, 2 hours south of the Paw is where she is, and traveling in and out to cover the fire situation. We spoke with her this morning for a live update at 7 a.m. Right now it is 8:22 and it's 9 degrees in the city. It's mostly cloudy. Well, let's stay talking about the fire. If there's one thing we know about Manitobans, whenever there's a tragedy, something that happens, people pull together to help. And that is what is going on in the north right now. Rebecca Johnson says she just wanted to do some good. So over the weekend, as evacuees from Cranberry Portage started coming to the town of the Paw, she started making calls. So by Sunday night, she and a team of volunteers had fed over 600 people. And now this initiative to help out and feed people and give them something to do, these evacuees in the Paw at least, has taken on a life of its own. And she's on the line with us to tell us what's happening next. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm well. I heard you've been busy. So you had the initial dinner and you had a meal last night, and there's more today. Is that right?
Yes, there's no stopping us now. We are doing like a lunch/supper today.
And who's helping out to do this? Is it just yourself, friends, family from the paw, and a handful of businesses? Who's been stepping up to help the evacuees?
So the first day and the second day of the barbecue, our businesses really stepped up. We got so many donations. It was absolutely amazing. And there was zero hesitation when I made these calls. All of our businesses were more than happy to jump in. We had Brody's No Frills, we had Tim Hortons, we had Bershide's Meats, we had Giant Tiger here in town. We even had some of our we had our RM of Kelsey. They stepped up and helped. Like it was amazing, and it was zero hesitation. The RM of Kelsey got us porta potties. They are also the ones who opened up their campground, the RV campground, and waived all fees for anybody who was coming into town with an RV. They could park there for free. There was electricity, water. And then for volunteers, it was basically the whole community almost. Like the first day, it was me, some family, and some friends. But after that, I've had a crazy amount of people reach out asking how they can help, how they can support.
Yeah, I saw this morning on your Facebook page. Today now you're moving to the Métis Hall, I think. You're doing a dinner of spaghetti today. Are you getting a lot of people that are asking sort of where they can donate and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, so far I've gotten a couple calls this morning, and our social media post that we made has gotten an amazing following. Like everybody is reaching out saying how can they help, and I am expecting quite a bit of donations this morning.
And what do you need still? Because somebody will read here and they'll read spaghetti noodles and sauce and such to kind of put on these dinners that you're continuing for the hundreds of evacuees. But do you also need other products and blankets? How are you doing on that front?
So yeah, we are obviously open to any blankets, clothing that anybody wants to donate. We can help distribute those as best as possible, and anything left over, I'm more than sure we can take to the hotels and assure that they get to the people. But I feel like toothbrushes, toothpaste, just some of the basic essentials that everybody might have left behind in the time of panic when packing, right? So really, we are open to anything.
Now, beyond the meals that you've been helping with, Rebecca, there's also, I noticed, they're opening the wellness center, even opened the pool, I think, to kids yesterday to try to help families, who had to flee, and you've got your whole family in tow and people need something to do, right?
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of our places here in town. I know that the Paw Regional Library, they have a play group in the morning, and that is also an amazing place to go, relax. You really don't need a reason to exist there. You could go read a book. You can get a book read to you. I know that they have story time. You could take your little ones and let them play with other little ones, get them interacting. And the staff there are absolutely phenomenal. And same with the Wellness Center. The Wellness Center is also an amazing place. You could take your kids to play, hang out, and also just interact with other kids, help it feel a little bit lighter for the younger ones, because it must be so confusing for them.
Where do you think that the spirit of this comes from in the Paw? Is it a Manitoba sensibility, a northern sensibility? It seems to come out every time we have floods, fires.
Yeah, I think it's our northern sensibility, because I've been born and raised in the Paw, Manitoba. My whole life I've been here. And just whenever something like this happens, our whole community just comes together, steps up. Even when we have a house fire, just one house go down, our whole community bands together. Even when somebody's sick, we'll do meat draws. We do all these things. I just love my little town because we never allow each other to go without or to suffer alone. We're always there for each other. And it's just zero hesitation when we get together to help one another.
Well, thank you. I know that you've been giving us updates. Sort of, you were on Radio Noon yesterday. Now you're with us on Morning on CBC. We appreciate you letting us know what's going on today in the fire zone. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me and letting me talk about my wonderful community.
Rebecca Johnson lives in the paw. Since the town the town has been really stepping up to help people who've been evacuated there from the Cranberry Portage community specifically. So she's been part of organizing meals for hundreds of people every evening since Sunday, when everybody just sort of came together. If you want information on the meals and other information on the wildfire situation, she said it in the interview there, the municipality of Kelsey, arm of Kelsey Facebook page is just the best place to go. A lot of people sharing information there right now, and maybe breathing a small sigh of relief, only because you heard Brittany got in Brittany Greenslade, our reporter, and others were able to get into Cranberry Portage. At least so far, it looks like no damage to structures, but of course, crews are still really hard at work. They're trying to keep everything safe, and this fire could be burning for quite some time. So the Premier will be in the area today, and of course, CBC will be giving full reports throughout the day. It is coming up to news time at 8:30, but first, Janet Stewart has popped in. Speaking of Radio Noon, hi.
Hello, Marcy.
So what's your call-in conversation today?
We're going to have a little fun. So we're kind of switching things up, lightening things up. We are heading into May long weekend. So imagine this. You're home, your best friend, your spouse, your partner comes in and says, great news, I've made a reservation. I want to know, Manitoba, what do you want them to say? What would you prefer? Would you rather that reservation be camping or a hotel? What do you want? Where do you, like if you were given the choice to go somewhere fun this weekend, what's fun for you? Camping? Hotel? So weigh in, 204-788-3797. We're talking about camping prep today on Radio Noon.
All right, thanks, Janet.
Thank you.
So you can leave a message now, 788-3797, as Janet said, if you're not able to join the conversation live between 12:30 and 1. Corey Funk's popped in with traffic.
Yes, big backups on Academy at Maryland. Earlier I said it was actually southbound, but it's actually northbound Academy at Maryland. Got a couple calls from both Diane and Brianne, actually, who both called to say it's backed up, even as far as Waverly. So look out for that. Give me a call if you see anything else, 204-788-3093.
Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is cloudy. Expect showers today. Right now, we are at 9 degrees. We're headed to a cool high of 12. Premier Wab Kinew is heading into the fire zone in northwest Manitoba today. A massive wildfire still threatens the community of Cranberry Portage. Officials at the Premier's office say Kinew plans to visit the communities where many evacuees are staying. Now, the Municipal Emergency Coordinator for Cranberry Portage says they are bringing in public health and mental health supports as the evacuees spend another day away from home. Some 550 people are in hotel rooms in the PAW. Emergency Coordinator Lori Forbes says it has been challenging for families in hotel rooms to keep children entertained. And she says while people in the PAW have collected toys and games for the kids, it's still a difficult time.
It's a very emotional time, right? Everyone just wants to go home. They want to make sure their house is okay, and they just want to go home. And we just can't tell them when that's going to be, and that can be very emotional. So we're really trying to support, them.
Forbes says despite cooler weather overnight, it is still too dangerous for people to return to their homes. Now, as of yesterday, the province's wildfire map says the fire is still about 31,600 hectares in size. Air tankers from Manitoba and Saskatchewan are dousing the flames, and 5 additional crews from Ontario are expected this week. Power knocked out by the wildfire is slowly being restored. Manitoba Hydro says power has been restored to Baker's Narrows, but a helicopter patrol of Cranberry Portage found extensive damage to hydro infrastructure. The utility says its crews now know what they're up against and are working hard to get everyone back on. Still, no estimated time for when that will happen. To other evacuees now. It has been 4 days since people were forced out of their apartments at Birchwood Terrace on Portage Avenue. Engineers uncovered corrosion on multiple columns in the underground parkade, prompting fears that 5-story apartment building might collapse. Mela Carrier lived at Birchwood. She says she noticed work being done on those steel pillars over the past 6 weeks, and she's angry the owner, Ladco, didn't warn them of danger.
Emotionally, it's like I'm living a nightmare. It's surreal. I feel like this shouldn't be happening in today's society with our technology. They should have known way in advance, and they should have protected us as their residents.
LATCO says it is working to bring the apartments back into use and will reach out to residents in the coming days. Carrier says she will not rent from that company again. She is now looking for an apartment to share with her daughter and their pets. The Fort Garry Public Library has been coping with a leaky roof for the past 2 years. The leak in the children's section has damaged a long strip of ceiling which had to be removed. Plastic liners are used on shelves to keep books dry. A second leak sprang up over the computer lab. Longtime library patron Allison Mercer is upset the city hasn't fixed the damage.
The city doesn't prioritize libraries in the way that they should.
A 2023 report from the city compared Edmonton, Calgary, and Regina's libraries to Winnipeg's. It found Winnipeg spends the least amount of money on libraries per capita. City officials say they have to prioritize needs based on budget. They say they currently are investigating the damage at the Fort Garry Library. And the city of Winnipeg wants to grant historic status to a very famous boot. The Boy with the Boot is a bronze statue at the entrance to the English Garden in Assiniboine Park. The city wants to add it to its list of historic resources. The statue was commissioned by the city in 1897. It has since been moved several times. The statue also has been repeatedly vandalized, and it was even stolen in the 1990s. It was returned after a few months. You can read more about The Boy with the Boot, as well as the latest stories from Manitoba, including the latest on the wildfires burning in northwest Manitoba. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
See, last time you were on the news talking about the boy with the boot, I was mentioning my childhood shoe that got bronzed.
Yes.
And another listener just showed me a picture of theirs. Same thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know.
You should take that out of hiding and put it on display.
I'll try to dig it out, try to find it. All right, thank you for the morning, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells, so from our news department. Abby, last look at the forecast.
Yes, across the province, we're expecting varying conditions from clouds and showers in Winnipeg, light rain in Brandon, partly cloudy, sunshine in Thompson and Churchill. The south has a good chance of showers continuing through Wednesday and Thursday, and we'll be seeing highs ranging from 4 to 15.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk.
We also got a call that from Linda, who said that she has also a lock of her hair, so Heather's not alone. So that's nice for her to know, probably, I'm sure. But in terms of the commute, Dennis called about westbound Marion at Archibald being backed up way past Archibald because of construction actually happening on Goulet. You lose your median lane, and then it switches after Desmond to your curb lane. So looking for that. Also, northbound Academy at Wellington, very backed up as well because of stalled car in the turn lane. So look up for that. Keep right to get around that. Big backups all the way to Waverly.
Okay, you ready? Somewhere I have a tooth that was my tooth from when I was a kid made into a ring.
Oh, wow. What?
I know. My uncle used to like to dabble in DIY stuff, and he made me this ring. When I was a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
I can one-up you with a necklace made of my great-great-aunt's hair from Russia.
A full necklace.
Yeah.
That was a thing. I think we did an interview about the weaving of jewelry back in the day.
Oma snuck it out of Russia in her shoe.
Thank you, Corey Funk. Thank you, Abby Adeyemi. Thank you very much to Brad Lillies, our live crew this morning. Thanks to our news department, Heather Wells. We can catch us in Joni Nicolo. And thank you for listening to Information Radio each and every morning. Thanks to our whole team of associate producers here who work on our programs, and also the leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. Take care, be well, everyone. Remember, the Premier visiting the fire zone. We'll have full coverage of that online and on our programs, cbc.ca/Manitoba anytime. And The Current is coming up next.